The creation of the International Space Station served as a symbol of the establishment of relations between the Soviet Union and the United States of America following the end of the Cold War. This unique scientific research center, located in Earth's orbit, has become a facility for solving tasks in the most extensive areas, from medicine to the technology of producing new substances and materials. Moreover, astronauts from different countries, regardless of the relations between their states on Earth, coexist on board. People are delivered to the ISS via the Soyuz space shuttle. One day, biologist Kira and engineer Christian are sent to the station, where 4 cosmonauts are already present. As Soyuz enters orbit, the Flight Control Center congratulates the pair, who are eagerly awaiting docking, joking about the Russian tradition of knocking on the door 3 times before opening it. Finally, the newcomers are greeted by their new teammates, American Gordon and Russian cosmonauts Nika, and brothers Nikolai and Alexei. Kira is amazed by the weightlessness and has to adjust to this new way of existence. Despite the language barrier and cultural differences, Americans and Russians get along well. Nika teaches Kira new Russian words commonly exchanged on the station. Then the woman is settled into her section. Gordon shows ways to get comfortable for the night. Personally, he sleeps in a bag, but some prefer a free flight. The woman immediately gets to work, placing the mice she brought with her into cages. Alexei helps her and explains that they also had many mice, but they cannot live in space as there's nothing for them to hold on to. In the evening, the astronauts have a festive dinner where each shares stories about their place of birth and they sing popular songs together. The only rule on the station is not to talk about politics. The newcomers distribute gifts from loved ones and souvenirs brought from Earth. Then Kira looks at Earth from the space station for the first time, and her colleagues explain the main effect of the view. From here, borders are invisible, and all of humanity is united and indivisible. Later, Nika helps Kira get ready for the night, as the first night is the hardest. But in the morning, the woman wakes up in excellent spirits, which is spoiled when she sees the mice in poor condition. Distraught, Kira looks at Earth and suddenly notices numerous flashes in the United States. She calls the others, and people realize that a nuclear war has started on the planet. Gordon orders everyone to immediately leave the dome and closes the shutters. Communication on board the station is interrupted, but everything works in normal mode. Then Gordon receives a written message from Houston stating that an act of aggression has occurred between Russia and America, and he must take control of the station by any means necessary. Later, he discusses this message with Kira and Christian, who suspect that the Russians received a similar order from their government. Nevertheless, people decide to wait at least a day before taking any action. But then, Nika reports a problem with the thrust. It turns out that the station is in too low an orbit and could fall to the Earth's surface unless the center makes system adjustments. The first tension among the astronauts begins to arise, as each thinks of their family left below. Nikolai informs the crew that the radio may not work because the antenna outside the station is broken, and it can only be fixed manually. Gordon goes out into space. Nika helps him put on his spacesuit and kisses the man goodbye, making it clear that their relationship is more than just professional. Once in open space, Gordon sees Earth engulfed in flames and asks Kira not to let anyone near the windows. Then he begins his work. To distract her colleague from negative thoughts, Kira asks Gordon about his relationship with Nika. He admits that he met her here, in space, and changes the topic to Kira's personal life. She shares that she spent 7 years studying organ replacement but faced failure, though everything might work out in zero gravity. Meanwhile, Alexei listens to their conversation and then cuts the wire. While Christian tries to find the reason for the loss of communication, the Russian cosmonaut replaces the damaged wire with another piece that looks intact, so the American finds nothing wrong. Gordon, meanwhile, approaches the antenna, for which he has to unhook the overly short safety tether. He realizes that the antenna is fine, then a mechanical arm starts moving, threatening the astronaut's safety. It turns out to be Nikolai's doing, without the knowledge of Alexei and Nika. Gordon tries to call out to Kira, but the mechanical arm knocks him off the station's surface and throws him into open space. Nika and Kira try to see the astronaut through the windows, then put on spacesuits and rush to the airlock, but upon extending the rescue rope, they find no astronaut at its end. Kira wants to go out and look for Gordon, but Christian asks her not to leave him alone with the Russians. They, in turn, confess to Nika that on the day communication was lost, they also received orders to eliminate the Americans by any means necessary. Alexei apologizes, not thinking his brother would do such a thing to Gordon, but the latter reminds him that he has no doubt the Americans would have done the same to them. Nika pleads with Alexei to save Gordon and threatens to tell everything to the Americans. She cries out of powerlessness, while Kira and Christian conclude that the Russians attacked first and Gordon is no more. Furious at her comrade's treachery, Nika goes to Kira and asks for her help. She is willing to give Kira her key in exchange for the key to the American locker. While she distracts her colleagues, Kira must sneak into the laboratory, open Locker 0, take out samples of radiation sickness medicine developed by Alexei in orbit, get into the Soyuz, and return to Earth. Because only by having the medicines can the survivors of the nuclear war be saved. Initially hesitant, Kira is persuaded by the argument that only the state with the medicines can dictate terms to the defeated and agrees, exchanging her key for Nika's. Nika sneaks to the location of the oxygen tube's junction, where she is caught by Nikolai and Alexei. They realize that the woman is ready to blow up the entire station just to avenge her lover's death. Nikolai tries to persuade her to abandon the idea, while Kira rushes to the laboratory. She can't find the Zero locker when Christian admits that there isn't one. Kira realizes that Nika deceived them, and they go to confront the Russians about their plans. Meanwhile, Alexei tries to persuade Nika not to blow up the station, but she behaves aggressively. Christian, sneaking up behind her, hits her on the head with a cylinder, but, miscalculating his strength, kills her. As the Russians come to terms with this, Christian and Kira decide to hide, hoping for communication to be restored. The man is devastated, as he only wanted to neutralize Nika, not kill her, and cries from the guilt. The brothers discuss the situation, and Nikolai asks Alexei to help him kill the Americans. He reminds him of their duty to their country and people, but Alexei refuses to participate in murder. He mourns for Nika while Nikolai, taking a screwdriver, goes in search of the pair. Later, Alexei, looking out of the porthole, suddenly sees Gordon, clinging to the side of the ISS. The Russian cosmonaut uses the mechanical arm to help Gordon return to the station, while Nikolai unsuccessfully searches for Kira. He tries to deceive the Americans, saying that Nika is alive. They need to gather together and think about what to do next, but instead of Kira and Christian, Gordon appears, armed with a drill. His friends, shocked by his resurrection, appear. The American demands to know what happened to Nika, and Alexei has to inform him of her death. Enraged, Gordon locks all his colleagues in the compartment and attacks Nikolai with the drill. The men fight until Alexei tries to open the door. Nikolai takes the drill from Gordon and wounds him, while Gordon pulls out Nikolai's screwdriver and in turn strikes his opponent in the neck. The astronauts who open the compartment find only 2 dead bodies, floating in zero gravity, embraced. The survivors arrange the bodies according to protocol and retreat to their sections, trying to make sense of what happened while the station orbits over the burning Earth. Later, Kira goes to the laboratory, examines the room, and finally finds the Zero module. This means Nika did not lie. She rushes to Christian and in his sleep capsule finds the Soyuz spacesuit and Russian research. It seems Christian was preparing to return to Earth alone. Meanwhile, Christian sabotages the station's life support system and tries to frame Kira, telling Alexei about Nika's plan to make the American woman take his research and escape. He accuses Kira of selfish motives when Alexei notices malfunctions. He observes a strange tension between Kira and Christian because of a knife the astronaut is using to make a sandwich. But Christian suddenly smiles and asks the Russian cosmonaut to leave them alone for a while. Alexei floats to the door, but Kira suddenly speaks a phrase about mutual support that Nika taught her. Alexei turns around. Then Christian confesses he disabled the life support system, grabs a knife, and attacks Kira and Alexei. A fight ensues. While Alexei blocks the knife with his hand, Kira strangles their colleague. Nevertheless, Alexei receives a knife wound to the hand. Kira provides him with first aid, and later they together restore the life support system. In the laboratory, Kira notices a net installed in the mouse cage, which kept the animals alive, realizing Alexei did this. Suddenly, the communication system turns on, normalizing the station's orbit, and the threat of falling is averted. Messages from their leadership arrive on the astronauts' computers, asking them to confirm that they have completed their missions to take control of the station. However, instead of responding or following government orders, Alexei and Kira take the research results, board the Soyuz, and fall to Earth in an uncontrolled freefall. Lastly, Alexei asks where they will fly to which Kira finds no answer. This is where the movie ends. Japan 2023. People board a train and head to work. Everyone is busy with their own things, scrolling through Instagram feeds, making acquaintances on social networks, and discussing plans for the evening, unaware that in just a few minutes, their lives will change forever. Suddenly, the train's speed increases, and strange things start happening. A bottle cap rolling on the floor of the carriage suddenly disappears. Passengers begin receiving alerts about powerful earthquakes on their phones. Then the train enters a gloomy tunnel and comes to a sudden halt. People regain consciousness, bewildered by what has happened. One of the passengers opens the entrance doors, and people, screaming and pushing each other, rush to the exit, jumping from the high steps. But once outside, they can't believe their eyes. Traces of the civilized world are gone, and they are surrounded by the remnants of a destroyed city, overgrown with trees and grass. Moreover, all the carriages have disappeared without a trace, except for the fifth one they were in. As time passes, the passengers begin to get acquainted. One of the guys, Shirahama, a firefighter, examines the injured and suggests checking the tunnel behind the carriage. He is joined by a girl named Katana and a guy named Hayashima, who also wants to understand what happened. Meanwhile, the police in the city cannot figure out where the last two carriages have gone, while the rest of the train, along with the passengers, remains undamaged. The three volunteers enter the tunnel and walk through the dark underworld for a long time. Suddenly, they notice a light ahead and hurry towards it, but when they emerge outside, they are astonished. There is nothing around that would remind them of the year 2023 with skyscrapers and technology, just a vast, lifeless desert. Shocked, the trio returns to their fellow misfortune mates. Initially, people do not believe their report, but after Hayashima shows a video recording of the surroundings, they are forced to accept the new reality. After 7 hours, people languish in anticipation of rescuers, when one of the girls, Reni, secretly looks into Hayashima's bag and finds a letter marked with the criminal department's seals, leading her to suspect that the guy's a criminal. Then Reni snatches food from Katana's bag, but, thinking she was seen, discards the package. Hayashima picks it up and carries it to the train, just as Katana discovers the theft. Seeing it in the guy's hands, the passengers accuse him of theft. Moreover, Reni reports about the letter from the colony. Offended, Hayashima denies the accusations and announces his departure. At this time, Shirahama pulls out a box of fruits and offers to share them. While Katana is distributing the food, one of the guys reviews the video he made earlier, clearly showing Reni stealing the food. Realizing that Hayashima is innocent, Shirahama and Katana run after him, managing to save the guy who nearly falls into a deep ditch. In gratitude, he confesses that he works as a hairdresser and is already 30 years old. But he refuses to explain the origin of the letter from the colony. Night falls. Passengers somehow settle down to sleep, but many cannot sleep, worrying about their future. In the morning, people begin to realize that they may never return home. Shirahama tries to gather the scattering people, but a friend asks the guide not to take responsibility for others' lives. Then the firefighter confesses that because of him, his colleague was injured, losing the ability to walk. Now he believes he must help everyone he can. Together, they catch up with those who left and persuade them to return to the carriage to solve problems collectively. Seeing this, Hayashima remembers his brother who was in prison, and the letter in his bag was from him. Fate had it that he had to take on the upbringing of his younger brother, and he still feels guilty for his older brother becoming a criminal. Meanwhile, a couple of passengers explore the surrounding area and find the ruins of a high tower. This is particularly strange because the news reported its construction, which was supposed to be completed in 2026. And one of the passengers found a can in the forest dated that year. A biologist among them encountered a plant whose genetic modification takes 30 years. It turns out that they are in the distant future of Earth, and it's far from a joyful discovery. At the same time, in 2023, all channels are broadcasting messages about the disappearance of two carriages, which had at least 100 passengers. Night approaches, and many fall into despair, while Katana and Shirahama place plastic containers on the roof of the carriage, hoping for rain. In the morning, the biologist draws the others' attention to the dense greenery, which means there must be a body of water nearby. A group of youth sets out to explore the forest. Along the way, Hayashima confesses that his parents are criminals, and then the guy spots a frog. This means water is very close, but ahead are impassable cliffs, which can only be climbed with the help of ropes. The group returns to the train and cutting wires heads back to the cliffs. Shirahama climbs to the top and joyfully shouts upon seeing a waterfall, but looking around he is horrified. Instead of Mount Fuji, a sea stretches out before him. Returning, he tells the others about this, and people start to speculate what happened to their planet. At night, everyone goes to sleep, but the eldest passenger, Tanaka, goes outside and sees an unfamiliar person. But when he tells about it, no one believes him. Then it starts to rain, helping people to collect water and even bathe. Meanwhile, the biologist continues to study the surrounding fauna, finds several edible plants, and shows them to the others. And still, Katana manages to eat a poisonous berry, but fortunately, her poisoning is not fatal. The news that the girl has recovered has a sobering effect on the passengers. They finally realize that sitting still, they won't survive. People get to work and even make utensils from bamboo. Bank cards turn out to be decent knives. The group of youths brings water from the waterfall, and they prepare a soup from plants. But after dinner, some feel sick and the biologist discovers a couple of poisonous berries in the common pot. Someone remembers seeing Tanaka near the pot, who is not among them. Shirahama sets out to look for him, but stumbles, falls, and loses his torch. After a while, Shirahama returns without Tanaka, but with Hayashima's previously lost barber tools, which he had sorely missed. In the morning, the biologist announces to the people that he is going to look for a river, which should be nearby. His friends go with him. But in the forest, they encounter a stranger who injures the biologist and runs away. The guys carry him back to the train, where fortunately there is a medical student who provides the injured with first aid. The others help as much as they can and pray for the guy. Later, Tanaka unexpectedly returns from the forest. It turns out he worked for a security company and can show how to make traps around the camp. Reni asks Hayashima to fix her hair, and soon there's a queue for the guy. Meanwhile, Shirahama and Katana notice a teenager caught in one of the traps, but the youngster gets out on his own and runs away. The friends hurry after him and soon find themselves by the river, but the boy asks them to wait for him at the spot and disappears into the forest. Hayashima, noticing their disappearance, catches up with the pair. At this time, the teenager returns and leads the friends to carriage number 6, which mysteriously ended up several kilometers away from the 5th carriage. The passengers from the 5th carriage are welcomed by the leader of the group from the 6th carriage, Yumamoto. Their carriage was lucky to be near the river, where there was plenty of fresh water and fish. Moreover, among them was a builder who, under his guidance, they were able to quickly set up a camp and even build a kitchen and a toilet. The newcomers find the one who injured their biologist. He confesses that he did it out of fear, thinking they were going to attack him. He bows deeply, apologizing for his action. And Yumamoto admits that he believes a return to the past is possible. The man told them that in the early days, they found a small boat on the river, where he managed to fix the radio and catch a signal, apparently from Canada, where the year 2060 was mentioned. From what he heard, the man understood that in 2026 a disaster occurred. A huge asteroid fell to Earth, causing powerful earthquakes and tsunamis worldwide, instantly taking billions of lives. The dust thrown into the atmosphere blocked sunlight, leading to the extinction of the remaining species. But the main thing is that the asteroid didn't fall by chance. It was space debris, as besides state corporations, satellites began to be launched by anyone who fancied. One of the probes collided with a satellite, which in turn fell onto an asteroid, leading to a deviation of its orbit. So it was a man-made disaster. That's why it's so important to return to their year and change the future. Inspired by the example of the 6th carriage, the passengers decided to make a bath by the river. Meanwhile, Tanaka continues to deteriorate, making himself a doll from branches and talking to it. In the morning, the bath is ready. For the first time in many days, people bathe in hot water and wash their clothes. And the guys find a strange stone on the riverbank, which Yumamoto learns about. He sends his people to find it, but Reni notices strangers, and one of the guys lets slip that according to their leader, this stone might help them return home. The girls argue about the need to return, and Reni pushes Katana away. She falls and accidentally shifts a layer of soil under which a dead body is discovered. Meanwhile, Tanaka reads in a newspaper an announcement about the search for a murderer in his description. At that time, Rennie and Katana are attacked by guys from the 6th carriage, but Rennie breaks free and runs to her own, where she tells about the found corpse, while Katana escapes from the guys through the forest. The 5th carriage decides to make weapons, while Shirahama and Hayashima run to the neighbors. But the girl is not there, and Katana meanwhile makes it to the boat. Yumamoto is forced to confess to the guys that he killed one of the passengers, who suddenly became aggressive and started attacking people with a knife. That's why he was recognized as a leader. The guys go home, hoping that Katana has returned, but she's not there, and the rest urge to go to the 6th carriage and punish the guilty. And the guys go again to look for the girl. Katana hides in the boat when Yumamoto comes in. He pretends to be calling an unknown station, but the girl sees that the wires are cut. The man discovers her and confesses that he doesn't want to return to the past because he intends to create a new society here. After that, he ties up Katana and locks her in the cabin, where her screams cannot be heard. In the morning, the passengers of the 5th carriage are just about to attack the neighbors when one of the women suggests backing up and looking for a building where they could hide. At this time, guys from the 6th carriage go to the neighbors to scavenge something, but they fall into traps. A fight starts when the rest of the 6th carriage's passengers arrive, and there are more men among them. The fight escalates into a real battle, which is stopped by the appearance of the escaped Katana, who accuses Yumamoto of lying. He is forced to admit to the deception, but he just wanted to keep people's spirits up. However, the passengers decide to exile the former leader. Before leaving, the man hands over a journal from the ship, which contains information about the tower that could help them return to the past. Meanwhile, those who went to search for the building reach the tower and find glowing asteroid fragments there. And in 2023, scientist Ray, after reviewing the video surveillance camera recordings, discovers that a wormhole appeared in the tunnel at the moment of the disappearance of 2 carriages, which apparently was the result of a distortion in the space-time continuum. The passengers study the journal found by Yumamoto and learn the exact date of the disaster. Moreover, they have an asteroid fragment that possesses a phenomenal magnetic charge. One of the passengers remembers how on the day of their departure, he saw something in the sky resembling a falling star. In the past, Ray, analyzing the same event, concludes that it was the flare from a supernova explosion. In the future, there's also an expert who explains that supernovas occur in space when a star reaches the end of its life cycle and explodes, releasing a massive amount of energy. Apparently, this created the temporal rift into which both carriages fell. It means they need to open this wormhole again. In the evening, a strong storm begins, forcing people to seek more reliable shelter than the carriage. Tanaka opens the rear doors leading into the tunnel. Unexpectedly, a strong gust snatches his doll and sucks it into the wormhole caused by the hurricane. But as soon as the storm subsides, the wormhole disappears. And in 2023, scientists find Tanaka's doll. Passengers in the future conclude that to summon the wormhole, they need a powerful energy source, for which they start looking for remnants of power lines. Digging up each post, the passengers find an electrical substation where, somehow, working equipment is preserved. They redirect enough electricity into the tunnel to stabilize the wormhole with the onset of the next storm, enough to return to the past. The storm starts at night, supported by the power of the substation. The wormhole opens, and everyone enters the carriage except Tanaka, who refused to return. The carriage is swallowed by the hole and races somewhere in space and time until its doors are opened by security service employees who say they have arrived on May 1, 2026, which means there are only a few months left before the asteroid falls. After going through quarantine procedures, the passengers tell the officials, presenting as evidence fragments of the meteorite and unusual plants from the future. Only the officials don't believe the stories about the upcoming apocalypse. Later, the internet buzzes about the incident. The time travelers find fans, which helps maintain interest in the traveler's story about the upcoming end of the world. Meanwhile, scientist Ray becomes convinced that the travelers are telling the truth, as he has also tracked the asteroid. One of the passengers posts an appeal on the internet telling ordinary people about the impending danger, and a passenger who held a high position in the government before the trip makes her way to the Minister of Defense. She listens to her former colleague and reports that the government believed them and is already preparing to launch a missile capable of altering the asteroid's trajectory to pass by Earth. Time passes, and the day of the catastrophe is about to dawn. The travelers decide to gather together on the platform to find out whether it was possible to avert the disaster, and if not, to perish together. But the military successfully completes their task and changes the meteorite's trajectory, saving humanity from total extinction. Quite an unusual series where various theories about the impending doom of humanity are mixed. And the finale of the story is very relevant, emphasizing that life on Earth is the result of the actions of each living being, and the future of the planet is a collective human responsibility. A man wakes up in the middle of a desert, not understanding how he got there and who he is. Suddenly, he sees an old man trying to escape the chase. The guy helps the elderly man, but he dies in his arms, having had time to name numbers 554, advising him to go to him and tell him that he got out. After burying the stranger, the man makes his way to the village. He asks the cab driver to take him to the train station, but the driver does not understand the meaning of the word. He tells him about his daughter and gives her name, 832. The guy remembers the old man and asks to be taken to 554. The man finds her at the bar and delivers a message from 93, but the woman is frightened and asks not to be dragged in. At this point, footsteps and a barking dog are heard outside, and the girl tells the man to run. He makes his way to the fire escape and sees a man in a white suit at the bottom, tossing a grenade in his hand. Then the man becomes dizzy, everything in front of him swims, and he wakes up in a hospital room where the man in the white suit calls him number 6. Later he declares that there is no New York, but that number 6 has always lived in the village, as his papers prove. Number 6 is taken to his house, but he looks around and goes to the street where he sees cheerful, happy people. He buys a map of the village, but there is nothing marked outside. A woman doctor catches up with him on the street and tries to persuade the man not to look for a way out, while he looks at the ghostly towers of high-rise buildings on the horizon. Then he jumps into an empty cab by the curb and drives into the desert. But as he climbs the mountain, he sees only sand and rocks in the distance. The action rolls back to an evening in New York when Michael meets a girl in a bar. The next moment, the doctor finds him lying on the sand and takes him to the village. Waking up, number 6 tells him about the meeting at the bar, but he does not remember what happened next. After getting to the town, number 6 realizes that the numbers on the doors of the houses correspond to the names of their residents, and then he finds house 93. He searches the apartment, not knowing what he's looking for. At that moment, number 2 enters, accompanied by a young man. Again, he convinces the man that there is nothing but the village, to which number 6 reasonably observes, if the old man has been followed, it means that he has learned something. Then number 6 can also get to the bottom of it. Number 6 goes to 554 again, and the girl confesses that the old man had drawings of his life before he died. Meanwhile, the cab driver and his wife receive an invitation to number 2's house, where he begins to question number 6, who at this time promises 554 that he will not come back if she tells him everything she knows. And the girl gives him a drawing of her dream, in which number 6 recognizes the Statue of Liberty, which thrills the man. It means he's not crazy. And that means that there are others who dream of getting out of here. At this time, the leader of the village, number 2, goes to his wife's bedroom and puts pills in the insensitive woman's mouth. Just then, his son walks through the door, unable to understand number 6's confidence in the existence of another place. And number 6, meanwhile, comes to the cemetery and sees a grave prepared for 93. So the management is ready to fake his funeral to keep the rumors at bay. This is where the doctor finds him. Number 6 suggests that she lie down on the ground and look at the stars. There are millions of worlds out there. Is there really only one? And where do the names of great men come from in his memories? Number 6 tells of a girl in his memories whose name was Lucy. In the morning, number 6 goes to 554's bar but is delayed on the doorstep when an explosion is heard in the room. When he comes to, he finds 554, but the girl dies, having managed to pass on 93's advice to go to the towers. The man tries to get the doctor to make sense of what happened, but the woman is frightened to death and asks him not to make things worse. Number 6 goes to number 2's house, blames him for the woman's death and promises to find a way out. He runs toward the towers, but a huge white ball appears in front of him and the man faints. In his delirium, memories of a boy playing on the seashore flit before number 6. In reality, he sees a man who calls him his brother. Number 2 tries to persuade him to admit his kinship, but number 6 does not believe him, even when he shows him their childhood photographs and reminds him of the scar he suffered as a child. Number 2 convinces the man to see a psychiatrist. The brother takes number 6 to his house where he's greeted joyfully by his nephews, and the brother's wife announces that she has cooked his favorite meals and invites him to watch the show they never missed together. Number 2's son watches his father feed his mother pills but hides, not wanting to give away his interest. Meanwhile, number 6 expresses to his brother that everything around him is fake. He does go to the psychiatrist and in the process he remembers Lucy. Then he tells her that he saw a seagull that lives by the water, and then it turns out that there are 2 doctors. Number 6 cuts the session short. Outside, his brother catches up with him, who has figured out how to get number 6's memory back. He takes him to the garage where the man is greeted enthusiastically by his co-workers. It turns out that number 6 is a bus driver. The man gets behind the wheel and takes a tour of the village while his brother acts as a guide, showing the local sights. Meanwhile, the psychiatrist reports to number 2. Number 6 is tormented by memories of another life which simply cannot be. And then the head of the village confesses that his wife has become like this because of him, and that his son, if he recognizes his real father, can abandon him. He demands to do everything to make number 6 believe in this reality. At this time, the tour bus pulls out of the village and number 6 sees an anchor in the sand. He swerves towards it and tries to convince the others that the object is real. There must be an ocean. He has visions of the 2 boys on the beach again, and his brother leads him to an abandoned building. This is where they played as children, but number 6 does not remember it. Later, the doctor tries to prove that these are false memories. Well, is someone going to make up another reality on purpose? Michael remembers Lucy again. Why did she approach him exactly that day, the day he was fired? A new day begins where everything is as usual. Clear weather, a constant soap opera, and the bus store, interrupted by number 2 to present his brother's family with a trip to a resort they won in the lottery. The man is overjoyed and hopes that number 6 will go with them, but questions about the sea stump the man. Meanwhile, number 6 catches the doctor looking at sketches of Big Ben and the Statue of Liberty which he has taken out of his pocket. Number 6 accuses her of spying and recalls telling Lucy about his job as an analyst at the company called Sumacor, watching surveillance tapes and collecting data on people. And when he realized he was violating the privacy of others, he became despondent. That night, number 2's son asks his father about his childhood because he cannot remember it. Number 2 advises him to put all doubts about his family aside, while number 6 has a dream about his brother entering the water, ignoring his cries. Later, he leads 313 to the ruins because he feels a strange connection to the place. And then, following his memories, he finds an old box with a note he wrote as a child. The doctor considers it proof that the village is real, but number 6 claims it is a trick, though he has his doubts. Michael has another flashback. He was explaining his reasons for leading Sumacor to Lucy when she suddenly admitted that she too worked for the firm. She told him that he shouldn't count on the stalking to stop after his dismissal. That same day, number 6 is stopped on the street by a woman on the tour bus. She once heard the sounds of the ocean in the desert. Together they drive to the desert, but no matter how much they walk across the sands, the woman can't find the place. Number 6's attention is distracted by a bus on its way to the resort. The man rushes to the village where his brother's family is waiting for him at the bus stop. When number 6 finally arrives, they decide to take the work bus to the resort. On the way, number 6 notices the towers and heads toward them. But images of despair flash before his inner eye when his brother is lost in the ocean. The man screams at the foot of the anchor. The vision changes. Number 6 is now tied to a pole, and number 2 puts a grenade in his mouth. There is an explosion, and number 6 regains consciousness to the screams of his brother, who begs him to pick himself up. Confused, number 6 apologizes for his behavior and is ready to accept 16 as his brother when he suddenly confesses that he's not. He has been forced to lie. He doesn't know what they want, but it has something to do with the other place, and he fears for his life. But number 6 promises that together they can stand up for themselves. 16 joins number 6 and the winking woman in search of the ocean. When they finally find it, 16 happily runs into the water. Number 6 remembers his brother's disappearance and asks him to stop, but a huge white ball appears out of the water and the man disappears. Number 6 tells 313 about it, and they go to the place together. But instead of the ocean, there are sand dunes in front of them. He returns to tell his family the news of his brother's death, but people are absorbed in the show. Number 6 screams in despair and is taken away by clinic workers, where number 2 comes and feels sorry for the man who has lost control of himself. He refuses to wear the number instead of his name, but cannot remember his real name and agrees to be number 6. Later, number 6 meets a man who takes him to number 2 for an important conversation, while 313 realizes he has been dreaming and tries to sketch out what he saw. In New York, Lucy tries to leave Michael's apartment, but he grabs her and demands that she tell the truth about why he's being followed. Number 2 introduces to number 6 village spy named 909 who is searching for those who dream of the other place. He suggested the men work together for it benefits them both. One will do the job, the other will satisfy his curiosity. 909 tells him that the cell agents do not know about each other and it is likely that someone is watching them as well. While they are assigned to number 1955, a history teacher, one of his students has reported him. To get closer to the suspect, number 6 takes a job at the school. Observing a lesson about the history of number 2, number 6 asks a question about number 1, to which he receives the answer that there is no such thing and never has been. Later, number 6 tries to provoke the teacher by asking questions about other places, but the teacher does not budge, saying that he's fine with everything here. Meeting with 313 after this conversation, he shares his conclusions that everyone around him lives in fear. Later, 909 and number 6 observe the history teacher. He likes to swim and he always dines alone, which 909 finds suspicious. And to make matters worse, the teacher leads a group of runners who are prime candidates for dreamers. During this conversation, number 6 notices 313 ahead of the running group. The next day, number 6 holds a lesson and one of the students shows him the latest tracking machine. And he gives the students an assignment: find out who everyone is working for and what their goals are. That evening, number 2 gives his wife black pills and she wakes up. At night, number 6 and 909 climb onto the roof of the teacher's house and watch him with a camera. 909 asks his partner to fetch coffee from his truck, where number 6 finds surveillance log. He looks through it and discovers that he's the real 909's mission, and that 313 is also on the suspicion. The couple is talking about their son when number 2 gives his wife a sip of wine and she falls back into a stupor. And the man notices that the surveillance camera has been installed in his garden. At this time, the teacher also realizes that he's under surveillance and slits his own throat. Number 6 insists that the man must be taken to hospital. The next day, the cab driver is playing with his daughter in the backyard when a huge hole in the ground appears there. Meanwhile, number 6 searches the doctor's roof and finds a camera, not noticing that he himself is caught on the nearest camera. Number 2 calls 909 and shows the camera he found. He notes that his son is acting strangely and wonders if number 6 has had any contact with him. The agent denies it, but number 2 does not trust him. And number 6 follows 909 and sees him in a bar with the mayor's son. It becomes clear that the couple are romantically involved. Number 6 recalls Lucy's confession that she has been reading Michael's reports and understands why Summercore wants to stop him. And in the village, he visits the teacher in the hospital and asks for help finding the other dreamers, but the man denies his involvement in any activity. The conversation is interrupted when number 6 senses that he's being followed. He runs after the stranger but loses sight of him, unaware that he has been spied on by his student. The next day, number 2 gives number 6 an assignment to spy on 909, but the latter first wants to warn the doctor. Only the woman shows him her own surveillance photos. He's the agent himself, having climbed on her roof. At this time, number 2's son is waiting outside his house for 909. The agent suggests that they take a break because number 2 suspects them. Number 6 enters and finds them embracing. He demands that they stop following the doctor or their affair will become public. Later, the father informs his son about the surveillance and says that he doesn't trust 909. He is determined to get all of his agent's secrets out. And then number 2's son goes to 909 with a knife. But the agent doesn't even think about resisting. He turns his back on the guy, letting him kill him. Meanwhile, number 6 runs to 313's house, but only sees her being driven away in a black van. He runs to 909 for help but finds him bleeding out. The agent asks number 6 to confirm that the dreams are true and dies upon hearing the confirmation. New York, Lucy tries to get Michael to admit why he quit his job, and suddenly she realizes he is already with those people. In the village, number 6 finds number 2's son in the bar and asks him to help find 313. Number 2's son sends him to the tunnels, a place inhabited by unmasked dreamers, passing the man off as sick 909. In the tunnels, number 6 finds his apprentice, who in turn helps him to find the doctor. But while they are looking for a way out, the white ball appears. Number 6 then wakes up in his apartment as the men in the white coats emerge from his door. Meanwhile, number 2 informs his son about the death of 909 and asks him to find up here. New York. Lucy says that she hears the name Curtis whispered on the decisions floor and insists that they go to Semaphore immediately. Michael kicks her out. She writes down the number and asks him to call her if he changes his mind. In the garden of the palace, number 2 treats the student to ice cream and thanks her for stalking number 6. Then he exposes her for spying on him as well, so the girl has to go to therapy. At this time, number 6 wakes up to the voice of a woman announcing on TV that it's time for him to find a romantic couple. He goes to 313 and she explains that this is how all couples find each other. Meanwhile, a big hole in the ground is forming in number 2's yard, which he attributes to climate change. Number 6 goes to the Modern Love Bureau. At first skeptical, he is delighted when the system pairs him up with 415, a blind woman who looks just like Lucy in New York. In the meantime, number 2 has a conversation with the doctor. He knows that she's a dreamer and she will have to betray number 6 even though she loves him. And number 6 goes to see 415. The girl explains that her blindness is the result of childhood trauma. He tries to convince her that they have met before in another life and recalls how close they were in New York. Then the girl says she doesn't usually act so impulsively. And 415 agrees to go to number 6 apartment. The action jumps to different times. Number 6 does not understand where he is Michael and where he is in the village. He tries to prove to Lucy that they have met in a past life. The girl freaks out and leaves. The next morning, number 2 observes his son stealing samples of pills from the safe. The boy takes them to the clinic and asks 313 to determine their content. Later, the father warns his son that once he learns the truth about the holes and his mother, there will be no turning back. Meanwhile, number 6 and 313 visit the cab driver and his family. The cabbie shows them the hole in his backyard. While the adults are distracted by champagne, the little girl falls into the hole and disappears. The loudspeakers in the village announce that every house should have a pig to combat weather anomalies, as their breath is a proven atmospheric stabilizer. The hole in 147's yard is backfilled, after which number 6 goes to number 2, hoping to find out where the girl disappeared to. But he leads him to his pit and advises him to marry 415, or to jump into the pit and find out what's in there firsthand. That night, the doctor, under number 2's supervision, injects number 6 and 415 with a hormone drug that makes people fall in love. The next day, number 6 visits 415's father and he convinces him to think about marriage. In the evening, 313 meets number 2's son and reveals the ingredients in his mother's pills. One a strong sedative, another a hallucinogen, and another of unknown origin. In the meantime, number 6 tries to ease 147's family's suffering from a missing child, while the doctor finds herself in number 2's bedroom, where she sees number 2's wife sleeping. The man is interested in the possibility of reversing love. 313 speaks affirmatively, but she's again such a way of winning the man over. That night, 313 goes to number 6 and confesses her feelings as he falls asleep. People from the clinic arrive and take him away. The doctor injects him with the drug, but the man wakes up and number 2 confesses that they caused his love artificially. But the man disagrees with this statement. His love is real, and he intends to marry 415. New York. Lucy and Michael wake up together. Lucy feels that she's not being her usual self and tries to leave, but Michael offers to cook breakfast for her. The girl asks for oranges. The man's consciousness is double again. He proposes marriage to Lucy and 415, and both respond by saying yes. On their wedding day, the doctor shows up at the church to tell number 6 that his feelings for 415 will not last. When the bride arrives, 313 kisses number 6. Sensing this, 415 runs off into the desert. Number 6 catches up with her moments before the white ball attacks. The two women take turns flickering. Lucy convinces Michael that she needs to leave because she brings danger, and 415 is knocked down by the bright flash and the wave from the ball. Number 6 calls her Lucy and tells her about their meeting in New York. She tries to deny it but eventually agrees with what he says. Number 2 brings her to the village to break his heart. Distraught, number 6 comes to equally distraught 147, who wants to jump into another pit to find his daughter. Number 6 is trying to convince him not to, and while he restrains his friend, 415 jumps into the pit. At this moment, his apartment in New York explodes, which Michael, who was carrying Lucy the oranges, sees. Number 2's wife in New York opens her eyes. In New York, Michael tries to get into his apartment but is chased away. Lucy in her recorded message asks him to stay away from Summercore, but Michael rushes there. Distraught, Number 6 screams at the palace gate, vowing to avenge the death of 415 without noticing his double looking at him from across the street. Later, Number 2 finds his son in the bar. The son accuses his father of lying and demands to know where the village is, and he admits that he is in his mother's mind and that she did all this for him. Number 2 gives his son the key to the safe with the pills, offering him a day with his mother. 313 wakes up and finds Number 6 sitting at her bedside. He recalls their kiss and reaches for her, but the woman asks him to stop. Number 6 leaves. The next day, Number 6 comes to see her at the clinic. He mourns the death of 415 and tries to find out what is in the hole. 313 wonders why he didn't worry about it last night. Confused, Number 6 claims he never went to her house. And when he goes outside, he discovers that he got into a fight with the cab driver yesterday. Confused, Number 6 returns home. His apartment is in ruins, a receipt from a grocery store is on the floor, and the words "see you later" are written on the mirror. New York, Michael's pass is already deactivated, but he convinces the security guard to let him go down to the basement for a new one. Number 6 goes to the store and he learns that he bought a knife here yesterday. He tries to convince 147 that his previous fight was with an imposter, and then he sees his double. He rushes out in pursuit and catches up with him, but the doppelganger knocks Number 6 to the floor and puts a knife to his throat. He demands to kill Number 2, who is responsible for the death of 415. Then he stabs him in the face and disappears. Number 2 prepares to leave the palace and finds Number 6 breaking through his bodyguards to warn him of the appearance of the double who is going to kill him. But Number 2 begins to behave strangely. He refuses to go in his car and goes for a walk in the village on foot, throwing off his suit. Meanwhile, Number 2's son sees a message with a warning about the appearance of his father's double and wakes up his mother. Number 2 meanwhile walks into a store and asks for cigarettes. The salesman reluctantly hands him a cigarette, then smokes with him, but after he leaves, the man calls the clinic. Mother and son are having lunch, during which the boy pokes his mother for information about other places. But the woman convinces him that the village has everything he needs for him. Number 6 again tries to warn Number 2 of the danger, but he calls himself a vagrant without a number and is not afraid to die. Nevertheless, when he sees Number 6's double, he agrees to get into the cab driver's car, and he takes him to his home to protect him from being caught as a wanderer without a number. Meanwhile, Michael goes to get a new card and recognizes the man as the village shopkeeper. The access specialist is skeptical until Michael proves that they share the same memory. 147 and his wife treat Number 2 to cake until agents searching for the double arrive. Number 2 flees while his wife gives out for a walk without noticing the formation of a new hole in the yard. Later, Number 2 comes to 313 and wonders if she wants to see the other place. He promises to grant her wish, even against her will. At this time, the son again asks his mother for permission to go to the other place, and the woman confesses that the holes appear when she's awake, and she also adds that the people born in the village cannot live anywhere else. The distraught son runs out into the desert and throws away the key to the pill cabinet. Meanwhile, 313 seeks solace in the arms of Number 6 but realizes it is a double. She runs away haunted by new visions and finds herself in the middle of the desert, while Number 6 tells Number 2's son about the doppelganger and his intentions to kill his father. The boy names the location of Number 2 and confesses that he recognized him. He is the doppelganger and the killer. In the village church, Number 6 finds Number 2, and he confesses that he created the village because he wanted a fresh start, free from the apathy and the cruelty of the real world. But apparently he was wrong. He recognizes the doppelganger and he's not afraid to die. The doppelganger grabs Number 2 while the real Number 6 appears. He stops to double. They will only win if they unite. At this point, Number 6's double disappears, while Number 2's son finds the key in the sand and puts his mother to sleep again. Number 2 returns home, explaining that his double has been found and apprehended. The shopkeeper is dragged to the clinic. In the middle of the desert, 313 finds a glass door with the Summercore logo on it and goes inside. At the same time, Michael and the master go to the task floor. In a room filled with monitors, profiles of the villagers are displayed. Michael recognizes the people as subjects from his reports. On one monitor, he watches Lucy's recorded warning until 313, following a long corridor, encounters a vision. She flees back into the desert. Michael goes to the window on the floor and sees Village Street and number 6. He knocks on the window trying to get his attention, but he looks toward the towers and turns away and leaves. Meanwhile, new residents arrive in the village who cannot answer where they come from. And at Summercore, the winking woman from the tour bus informs Michael that a car is waiting to take him to Mr. Curtis. In the village, number 6 receives a summons to the clinic, where he shares with 313 his concerns. The village is expanding. Apparently, number 2 is up to something. At that moment, the doctor receives his test results and is frightened. At the same time, looking around the village, number 2 tells his son that all of this is his inheritance. Their conversation is interrupted by number 6, who wants to know exactly why he's now certified to die. Number 2 replies that he has exhausted all means to convince him to live peacefully in the village or not to live at all. In the meantime, 313 continues to be haunted by visions from another life, but number 2 warns that she must not let the girl from the other place control her. Otherwise, she will not be able to help number 6. At the cemetery, number 2's son lays flowers in the grave of his friend 909, where number 6 meets him, asking him to help everyone get out of the village. The boy claims that his mother cares for him, but number 6 warns that she's also killing all hope in him. Later, number 6 feigns in front of 147, who offers to take him to someone who might be able to cure him. In New York, Michael is escorted to Mr. Curtis's car, where he recognizes the driver as 147 from the village. On the way, the driver explains that he used to be an evil man, but Mr. Curtis helped him change his life. In the village, 147 takes number 6 to the village prophet, and he tells him that the deliverance is coming, they just have to wait. But number 6 has no intention of giving up. He goes to see number 2's son, who is drinking alone. The man asks him about his mother and the pills and offers to run away with him, but the boy refuses. He has a case to finish. In the New York City, Michael visits Mr. Curtis, who turns out to be number 2's prototype, and his wife, who is in a dreamlike state. Mr. Curtis explains that the village is an experiment taking place in the woman's mind. She sacrificed herself so that broken people could have a better life, if only in her mind. At this time, number 2's son enters his parents' bedroom and strangles his mother to death. Mr. Curtis confirms that it was Michael who found everyone in the village. Meanwhile, at the clinic, number 2 taunts dying number 6 with details of his upcoming funeral. Later, number 2 returns home to find his wife dead and his son missing. He and his assistant searched the bar and discovered that his son has hanged himself. Number 2 takes his body out and places it in a glass coffin. More and more earth holes begin to open up in the village. Number 2 visits 147 and asks that at just the right moment the man shout the phrase that number 6 is the first. Back in New York, Mr. Curtis shows Michael the positive impact of the village on suffering people. The man recognizes the inhabitants of the village who here in real life are cheerful and contented, and yet he's convinced that people should not be helped without their consent. Mr. Curtis offers Michael the opportunity to continue the experiment and gives him a pass to the Summercore's main floor. At this time, number 2 offers 313 a way to save number 6. Number 2 finally realizes that number 6's weakest point is his humanity. He's so right that he wants to live his life according to his conscience. If she wants to save him, she must give herself to number 6. Later, he reminds number 6 that the doors are open, and he can go wherever he wants. But first he must confess that he needs the village, and it is his fear that causes the white bowl. Number 6 sees this object and, unable to confront his deepest fear, runs away. The villagers gather for number 2's son's funeral. Number 6 comes too, for his fever has miraculously passed. Number 2 reads the eulogy and confesses to the crowd that his son's death was suicide and that they are all prisoners of the village. At this time, in a New York church, Mr. Curtis introduces Michael to Sarah, 313's prototype. She's mentally ill, suffering from the effects of childhood abuse. The man tells Michael that he worked with the girl for a long time until she resisted. Meanwhile, number 2 admits that he cannot save the village and soon everyone will be in the abyss. The child throws a stone in number 2's face and he points to number 6. He can answer all their questions and he calls him number 1. Mr. Curtis asks for help to cure Sarah, for Michael is number 1. The crowd begins to chant that number 6 is number 1 and will save them all. Number 2 tells number 6 that the only way to plug the holes is for a dreamer to take his wife's place. That's when 313 steps forward and takes the pills. Michael takes Sarah by the arm, catching her as she falls. And number 2 puts a grenade in his mouth. He gives it to number 6 and pulls out the pin. Mr. Curtis returns home and finds his wife healthy. On the appointment floor, Michael takes over as the new head of Summer Corps. On the high ground by the village, number 6 and sleeping 313 look out at the world around them. The man confesses that he has only now realized how beautiful it is here and intends to create a good village. 313 sheds a tear. The film is quite complex. It is not always immediately clear what is real and what is a flashback or hallucination, especially when it comes to the same characters, but everything is redeemed by a rather unpredictable ending which explains all the strangeness of the plot. The man opens his eyes in the middle of a lake with a red drone flying overhead. Visions of his family, spaceships, and shootouts flash before him. Finally gathering himself, the man swims towards the shore, accompanied by the drone, which he calls Ezra, to check his mental health. Suddenly cries for help echo from the lake, and another man, followed by a woman, appears. None of them remembers what happened to them. Fina recognizes the wreckage on the shore as the remnants of a warship called Karik, and Ezra recalls an invasion. Then the men discover the remnants of a car that must have been there for centuries. Apparently, there used to be a road in this place. People remember the invasion, and it turns out they all died in different years. Moreover, Abram confesses that he is 67 years old, although he looks 25. According to the red drone, they were brought back to life in their prime years. Their memories are different because they died at different times. Around them is Earth, but 400 years after the extinction of humanity, destroyed by aliens. They were resurrected by creatures living in the water, called sparks. The ultimate goal is the revival of humanity, and the rest of the information can be found in the settlement where the others who have returned live. The drone orders Ezra to collect the sparks. Gathering their meager belongings, the people set off after the drone, trying to understand why the Kariks revived them. Soon they find partially destroyed arches, and Abram rushes to them, rejoicing in his young, strong body. On one of the structures, he sees unknown hieroglyphics and touches them. The man is thrown back, and he admits that he saw everything. Suddenly, the red drone is shot down, and a second shot wounds Abram. The trio runs behind a hill where Ezra, setting up an ambush, captures the pursuer. The man, named Jax, denies the existence of the settlement. The glowing substance on his neck is a skin rider, which is one with the human body. He needs the sparks, but Fina confidently demonstrates her proficiency with a weapon. Abram insists that when he touched the unknown symbols on the arch, he felt the vastness of outer space. But this elicits mockery from Jax, who suddenly frees himself and lunges at Ezra. However, Fina points his own weapon at him. This time they tie the man securely and leave, despite his claim to know Ezra's brother. Soon the team takes shelter in a cave, while others with glowing parasites on their necks are found, including Ezra's brother Silas. Meanwhile, the resurrected people in the cave discuss ways to recreate a human being and wonder where the aliens obtained the initial material. During the night, Abram's wound becomes inflamed. He is lowered into a small pond where the sparks are released. By morning, Abram emerges completely healthy. Fina discusses what happened to Ezra, as she doesn't understand why they chose her out of millions of great people. Soon the resurrected individuals see high walls of a settlement in the distance, but on their way, skin riders with glowing necks catch up to them. Ezra stays behind to delay the pursuit. He manages to do so for a while until he recognizes his brother Silas among them. In the meantime, Fina and Abram reach the settlement's walls, and just when it seems they are destined to be captured, the gates open. A yellow drone neutralizes the skin riders and lets the fugitives inside. It then flies after Ezra, carrying him through the air into the settlement where there's no one around. In response to all their questions, the drone invites them to follow and shows them rows of graves where the settlers rest. Later, the yellow drone opens the doors of an abandoned military base for the people where the previous settlers lived. In the forest, skin riders capture a man who escaped from them. Silas discovers that the glowing creature they call companions has inexplicably stopped functioning in Duncan's neck and promises to fix it. The resurrected individuals learn that the settlers died from a new virus that still spreads throughout the region. The yellow drone asks them to release the sparks into a vessel with water and learns from them that the sparks can create a vaccine if people bring the ingredients found in the living lake. Fina begins to bleed from her nose and she stays at the base while the men go to the lake. She takes on the task of repairing the damaged red drone. On their way, Ezra tries to understand how the system that brought them back to life works. The drone operates on sparks, but who controls the sparks is unknown. The men reach the lake and release the sparks into the water to collect the necessary ingredients. In the settlement, Ezra's wife Lynn suddenly appears before Fina. She explains that she worked as a nurse during the invasion and can offer help, but then disappears just as suddenly. On the lake's shore, Ezra confesses that one of the skin riders is his brother, meaning these people are also resurrected. He recalls the moment when he first saw the alien spaceship flying overhead and signaled to his brother that he was a worthless, spoiled child. Now he is determined to apologize and try to retrieve Silas. Meanwhile, a hologram of Lynn appears again to Fina, helping her repair the red drone. In the meantime, the yellow drone warns of the approaching skin riders. Ezra asks Abram to run while he himself tries to intercept his brother Silas. However, he gets surrounded and subdued. Regaining consciousness, he finds himself alone with his brother, who admits that he prohibited forcibly transforming him into a skin rider because he wants his brother to join them voluntarily. Each skin rider has a companion on their neck, which teaches the person how to behave correctly and telepathically connects them with others. Thanks to the companion, Silas is now the leader and mentor for the others, whereas in the previous world, he was nobody. Then Silas suddenly falls asleep, signaling Ezra to leave. Ezra meets Abram in the forest, to whom he explains his intention to save his brother. The men return to the lake, where the sparks have created 3 vaccine capsules for them. After consuming their doses, they bring the third one to Fina, whose condition worsens. Lynn asks the red drone to replace her image with someone dear to the girl, and Duncan appears next to Fina. Fina regains consciousness after her friends administer the vaccine. The next day, Abram finds a room that is blocked, revealing a glowing obelisk. Meanwhile, in the forest, Silas argues with Duncan about the purpose of the companion controlling the thoughts of the skin riders in the community because Silas believes it amounts to slavery. In the settlement, Abram learns to read hieroglyphs and understands that the unknown hosts offered to dig up weapons against the skin riders in the forest in exchange for more people for the settlement. Ezra goes to the forest for the excavation. Meanwhile, Silas brings Duncan to an open area where Jax conducts training fights, taunting regular people. Unexpectedly, Duncan defeats Jax. Silas stops the duel and explains that he tested his theory, revealing that humans react faster by a fraction of a second than skin riders. Currently, Duncan has a weak companion, so he makes decisions with just one brain, the human one. In contrast, skin riders with healthy companions have a signal that passes through 2 brains, the humans and the companions, causing a slight delay. The conclusion is that humans will always outperform them in combat. To gain an advantage over humans, Silas plans to perform brain surgery to reduce the signal delay. However, a working drone and a test subject are required for this. In the meantime, the yellow drone brings Ezra to the excavation site, which the skin riders immediately learn about. Ezra unearths an item that the yellow drone calls a weapon. In the settlement, Abram, upon touching the obelisk, suddenly realizes that he understands the meaning of the hieroglyphs on it. However, he doesn't yet grasp what this knowledge entails. In the forest, the yellow drone warns Ezra about the approaching skin riders. They attempt to flee, but the skin riders surround them and take the unearthed weapon. Unexpectedly, the weapon activates and kills one of the skin riders. Taking advantage of the chaos, Ezra scatters the rest and escapes. Meanwhile, Fina tries to find out from the red drone why the unknown beings are resurrecting humanity. She requests the revival of Duncan, unaware that he has already been resurrected and has become a skin rider. Ezra brings the weapon meant to eliminate skin riders to the obelisk, hoping it will help establish contact. However, he refuses to kill the innocent inhabitants until the obelisk explains who they are and what is happening. The drones controlled by the obelisk promise to resurrect Ezra's family if he obeys them in all matters. Ezra has no choice but to comply. Later that night, Fina goes to the obelisk, where she finds Ezra, who, like her, hopes for the return of loved ones. They notice that the weapon unearthed in the forest has opened. The obelisk issues new symbols, instructing Fina to go to the lake to receive new people. However, skin riders spot her on the way. As for Abram, the drone tells him about the structure of the glowing companion on the necks of the skin riders, which is tightly connected to the human brain through a crystalline structure. The weapon found in the forest destroys these crystals, eliminating the parasite. When a skin rider dies, its memory is preserved on the crystal, which is passed down to its ancestor. This is what needs to be found and destroyed. Fina sees Lynn emerging from the lake and helps her get ashore. When Jax appears on the shore, the red drone neutralizes him. The girls attempt to escape but are captured by Duncan, who seizes the red drone and fails to recognize Fina, his beloved from the past. The girls try to flee, but Lynn injures her leg and orders Fina to go to the settlement and fetch her husband. Lynn, on the other hand, falls into the hands of the skin riders, who return her to the lake. There, Jax shows how the sparks work, healing her injured leg. But suddenly a stone hits Jax's head, and an unknown little wild girl takes Lynn to her forest dwelling, providing her with shoes and food. However, it turns out the girl cannot speak. During this time, Fina reaches the base and informs Ezra about the resurrection of his wife Lynn. Despite the yellow drone's warning that when skin riders take someone, it's forever, Ezra is determined to rescue her. Jax finds the little wild girl's home, but she has already taken Lynn away. They hide in the forest. At the same time, Ezra contemplates how to disable the force field since the obelisk prevents him from doing so, leaving him unable to leave the gates. Fina admits that she saw Duncan, who is also with the skin riders now, and he didn't recognize her. She fears the same will happen to Lynn. Meanwhile, in the forest, Jax tracks the runaways and explains that even the sparks make mistakes, resulting in flawed individuals. He is ready to destroy the little girl, but Lynn persuades him not to do it. At the same time, Silas extracts the crystal companion from the deceased skin rider's neck and instructs one of the women to take it to the ancestor. Then, they bring Lynn to him. As for Abram, while communicating with the obelisk, he suddenly surmises that he had lived in this settlement before, which is confirmed by a notebook he found with his own handwriting. Later, Fina speculates that they all have lived here before. The yellow drone confirms this fact and leads Abram to a graveyard, where he shows everyone who is buried there, including Ezra's grave. It turns out that he had also been resurrected and lived in the settlement at one point. Then the yellow drone guides Abram to the next grave, where he finds himself and encourages him to start a new life honorably. Fina demands that the man bind himself. He agrees, but suddenly snatches a weapon from Fina and stuns the skin rider standing behind her. At the same time, in the bunker, Abram is trying to find out from Yellow where the progenitor is located. However, she does not know, but Jax knows, and he heads to the bottomless lake, dives into it, and emerges in a cave. Meanwhile, Silas is trying to convince Ezra that life in his community is much better than in the bunker. Fina begins to trust Duncan and agrees with his plan. And in the camp, Lynn's escape is discovered. Duncan immediately receives a message about this from other skin riders and agrees with Fina's plan to send them on a false trail to enter the camp and save Ezra. The pursuit heads in another direction. Silas demonstrates to his brother the capabilities that a companion gives to the human body. He dips his hand into a vessel with sparks and explains that they cannot kill a companion as it goes against their principles. So if Ezra wants to kill the companion, he will have to kill the person. Fina and Duncan infiltrate the camp and seize the skin riders' weapons, and Jax reaches the ancestors' dwelling place. He asks them to explain how the drone works, and several human figures come out to him. Fina and Duncan find Lynn. The girl explains that after being infected by the parasite, she immediately plunged her hand into the sparks and it seems to have helped. Duncan asks the women to leave while he finds Ezra. The ancestors show Jax how the drone works. And in the bunker, Yellow confesses to Abram that not a human lies in one of the graves. Silas proves to Ezra that the obelisk is no better than a companion, as it also subjugates people. He lets slip that all of them, including his brother's wife and daughter, once lived in the settlement. Their conversation is interrupted by Duncan, who, under threat of arms, takes Ezra and leads the group to the settlement by a shortcut. But the protective barrier detecting a companion in Duncan does not let him pass, unlike Lynn. Then Fina ties his hands. But at that moment, the pursuit led by Silas bursts onto the clearing. Duncan pushes Fina behind the barrier, and they with Ezra prepare to fight. Abram runs to the obelisk, and it lets the men through on the condition that Duncan remains in the yard until they figure out how to free him from the parasite. At the same time, the ancestors express concern about Jax's hatred for humans, as they are much better carriers than Kariks, and they advise him to find a compromise. Meanwhile, Duncan confesses that his companion is still weak, but he is gaining strength. He remembers the settlers and confirms that Kylie is alive. Sparks rejuvenate people in the prime of life, but children at the age of their actual death. He also lost a wife and a child, and it was Fina, although the woman does not remember this. Abram explains that they are another generation of the revived. The first one lies in the graves, and they are them too. Jax reprograms the red drone, refusing everything human that was in its memory. Fina unties her husband, but when she falls asleep, Duncan's companion receives a signal from Silas, and he heads to the bunker. There, Abram confesses to Ezra that the drone showed him the memory of another woman he saw a year before the invasion. It feels like someone knew about the invasion and offered people help. He wants to consult with Yellow, but she is nowhere to be found. This happens because Duncan is just locking the drone behind one of the panels. Then he attacks Abram, knocks him out, and heads to the obelisk, despite his human side resisting it. He screams in frustration and Ezra hears him. He runs to him, but Duncan closes the doors and enters symbols that deactivate the force field. Realizing this, Ezra rushes to Fina and they manage to barricade the bunker doors. Duncan's companion comes out in the open and confesses that all this was done for the sake of the weapon he hid. He is ready to reveal where Kylie is now if they hand over the bunker to the Skin Riders. The man is tied up. Outside, the sounds of banging are heard, Skin Riders trying to break down the door. Through Duncan, Silas offers to hand over the bunker. Then he will say where Ezra's daughter is now, because someone from the first settlement managed to avoid death from disease. A debate ensues, resulting in a decision to deactivate the parasite using Lynn's medical knowledge. Jax returns. He expresses his dissatisfaction to Silas, as he could have infected Ezra long ago, but lets him go. Silas cuts off the conversation and orders to continue working on the drone. At this time in the bunker, Lynn tries to figure out how the companion works, and it confesses that it can cause great pain to its master. Ezra and Abram conclude that the settlement existed for at least 10 years, and there must be survivors, otherwise, who buried the fallen. Moreover, Yellow said that a drone is buried in one of the graves. At that moment, the knocking at the door resumes. Ezra remembers that there is electricity in the bunker. Fina digests the cable, and a strong electric shock destroys one of the Skin Riders. At the same time, Abram finds Yellow. Simultaneously, people realize that Duncan is acting as a transmitter, and they move him to another room. As they part, Ezra asks to tell his brother that he loves and believes in him. This message puzzles Silas. Yellow scans Duncan and discovers that the parasite has affected all human organs, and even the sparks cannot save him. Abram tries to get answers from the obelisk. Moreover, Yellow said that Duncan was given access codes, but by whom? The man again remembers that woman in the hospital. She had a drone, sparks, and symbols of knowledge on her bracelet, so something was known before the invasion. At Ezra's request, Yellow shows the image of the woman, and he recognizes his mother, Eleanor. Meanwhile, Silas prepares to continue breaking down the doors, but something leads him to the cemetery. Jax, following him, reminds him that he is not human and he should not care about the graves, so he intends to start silencing personalities from him. Silas is arrested. At this time in the bunker, Yellow confesses that Eleanor was one of the initiators of the revival of the human race. Duncan is not lying. Kylie was in the settlement, and only he can say where the survivors are now. Duncan's companion is knocked out with a tranquilizer, and the man is tied to a table. While the parasite sleeps, the man comes to and points on the map the direction the survivors went. He advises finding the wild girl and wakes up. After which, Yellow finds the weapon he had hidden earlier. The people notice the silence outside and, opening the doors, kill the sentinels left by the Skin Riders. Making sure that there is no one else in the yard, Ezra and Lynn say goodbye to their friends and set out to find Kylie. Jax activates the drone, intending to remove the human personality from Silas, and learns about the presence of Ezra and Lynn in the forest. He sends the Skin Riders to follow the pair. Fina comes to Duncan and admits that she is ready to kill him to free her loved one. However, Yellow knocks him out. The man regains consciousness in the cemetery and is relieved, thinking that Fina could not bring herself to harm him. In fact, Yellow has injected a beacon into his body, and now people can track his path. At this time, Ezra and Lynn find the wild girl and ask her to guide them to Kylie. Silas regains consciousness when the red drone informs him that he did the opposite, preserved his personality, and suppressed the parasite's capabilities. At the same time, Ezra and Lynn notice they are being followed and try to evade the Skin Riders. However, arrows fly from the rocks, the Skin Riders perish, and the survivors approach the people. Meanwhile, in the camp, Jax leaves Duncan on guard while he and his people follow Ezra and Lynn. They are then scanned for safety, and upon confirmation, the settlement leader Rowan leads them into the camp. She warns them that they do not truly know their daughter. They only remember her up to the age of 6, and they are merely copies of those who lived in the settlement. Abram and Fina dig up a broken drone from the grave, hoping to retrieve data from its memory. Rowan brings Ezra and Lynn to the hidden camp in the mountain caves. Noticing the strange expressions on people's faces, she explains that they both died defending the previous camp from an attack. If it weren't for Lynn, no one would have survived. Silas killed the woman. Fina connects Yellow to the memory of the broken drone, and she promises to show the events of the past. At the camp, Ezra and Lynn's adult daughter arrives. Although she understands what they feel, she refuses to recognize them as her parents. Red notices that Silas is experiencing severe pain. He flies to Duncan, and at that moment in the camp, a bloody Justin appears, who orders him to take the rest of the people and rush to the place where they were ambushed. He carries out the order, and Jax disappears because it was a hologram created by Red. Silas escapes. The real Jax finds the ambush site and orders a search of the rocks. In the bunker, Yellow transports Fina and Abram into a virtual reality of the past settlement where people go about their daily activities. Jax enters the gates and explains that Silas developed a growth on his neck, after which he attacked his friends. All this happened near the old Karik ship. Returning to their reality, the people realize that this was the first case of companion infection. Yellow explains that the parasites create a structure similar to fungal spores. Silas likely inhaled them. The parasites themselves were brought by the Kariks, who were their carriers before humans. Meanwhile, a boy from the survivors, Thomas, carelessly falls into the hands of Justin. Silas begins to experience severe pain. Red tries to alleviate his condition and notices Duncan rushing towards the bunker. Apparently, he has discovered his escape and wants to detain Silas. Red leads him another way. At the same time, Thomas learns that he has been infected with the parasite. At the camp, his absence is noticed. Rowan calls a council and Ezra advises them to flee. If Thomas reveals the camp, they will not survive. Yellow shows how Abram proposed to create a virus capable of killing the parasite, although the idea itself belongs to the obelisk. People heatedly discuss this proposal, and many disagree. Lynn suggests splitting up. Those who take the virus should stay in the bunker, as they will be weakened. Rowan speaks against it. Abram realizes that he was the cause of the remaining deaths. In the caves, Ezra urges everyone to leave while he defends them. At this time, Silas reaches the bunker and sees Duncan sitting by a campfire. He lures him into the workshop and locks him in there. Abram is overwhelmed with guilt, runs to the obelisk, and voices his accusations. Suddenly, it creates the image of a second Abram, who says that on the other side of the obelisk are creators who sincerely believed they were saving the settlement. The virus just turned out to be slower than the parasite cells. The second Abram disappears as voices of Ezra and Lynn come from behind the doors. Fina opens the doors, and friends push Silas inside. They immediately disappear as they were holograms created by Red. Silas asks to be heard. The drone supports this request and reports that they cannot destroy the ancestor without Silas. At this point, the boy loses consciousness, and they bring him inside. Ezra, Lynn, and the young archers set up an ambush, but Thomas appears, shoots at them, and wounds Kylie's fiancé, Nico. Ezra kills the boy, and upon examining, finds a parasite. Lifting his arrow, he realizes there is something on its tip. At that moment, Jax appears with his people and calls them to battle. Red puts Silas into a coma. Meanwhile, Lynn and Kylie bring the injured Nico inside. Justin orders his man to watch the backup entrance to the cave. Lynn starts treating Nico, but the worst part is that the arrow tip might have a parasite larva. The boy then demands to be killed, as Lynn herself set such rules. Duncan tries to call any of the Skin Riders for help, and Yellow explains to Fina and Abram that the parasite is killing Silas so that he cannot reveal the way to the progenitor. Then Red admits that he can link the minds of Abram and Silas, which might help reveal the secret. At this time, Kylie decides to help her father patrol. The girl recalls the past and calls Jax his best friend, which greatly surprises Ezra. And his urge to kill arises because the parasites are very afraid that the human inside might take over if he remembers his attachments. Father and daughter return to the cave, and Ezra proposes that his wife, daughter, and Nico take another road while he guards them. After heated arguments, they head to the second exit. Abram enters Silas's mind and finds himself in a church. It turns out that the boy's mind considers the church a sanctuary. Abram admits that Silas will no longer come to himself, and he himself describes the way to the lake of the progenitor. The parasites are interconnected precisely through it. It is the source of their energy, strength, and knowledge. Silas knows for sure humanity will not survive if the lake does not disappear. Ezra resorts to trickery, and Kylie kills a lurking skin rider. The father bids farewell to everyone and stays in the cave. At the same time, Abram and Fina develop a plan to destroy the progenitor. Yellow explains that the weapon consists of 3 parts. 2 of these are standalone weapons, capable of operating independently of each other. However, the top part is dangerous for humans themselves, so it is discarded. Only the lower part remains, which destroys the progenitor. But this part will not work without the middle, where a human personality must be placed. But the progenitor has studied all the skin riders in this world, so the chances of getting into it are slim. And then Abram realizes why Silas was needed. Later, Fina reflects on her promise to Duncan to kill him and free him from the parasite. Then, Yellow admits that her husband is in the workshop in the yard. The woman arms herself and heads to the yard, but just as she is ready to open the door to the workshop, a skin rider enters the yard and releases Duncan. Fina tries to stop the men, but Duncan reminds her that she cannot kill him and leaves. At this time, Abram comes to Silas again and explains that they need his help. Jax decides to attack, realizing that Ezra is the only defender of the camp. He orders his men to engage him while he himself follows the trail of Lynn, Kylie, and Nico. Nico is losing strength, and Lynn decides to make a stretcher, although the boy asks to just leave him. And Ezra sets up an ambush and one by one eliminates the skin riders, then follows the trail of his wife. Nico transforms and grabs Lynn by the throat. He is ready to kill the woman, but Kylie interferes. The boy's companion admits that the girl is very dear to him, but he cannot indulge the carrier's weaknesses, and when Nico raises his sword, Kylie shoots him. Ezra catches up with them, not knowing that Jax is monitoring their reunion, but he receives a message about Silas's betrayal, and Jax leaves. Silas asks Abram to wait for his death, take his crystal, and insert it into the weapon. Then he will be in the middle part and can help. Abram does not fully understand how it works, but thanks Silas. They say goodbye. Abram comes to his senses when Silas dies, and Jax catches up with Duncan and his men by the lake. After a dispute, he orders everyone to stay in ambush, and he and Duncan will dive to the progenitor. Meanwhile, Lynn and Ezra bury Nico and console their daughter. Simultaneously, Fina and Abram bury Silas. Later, the groups meet, unaware that a black drone is watching them, which takes off above the earth and heads for a spacecraft. Abram tells Ezra everything that happened with his brother and the plan to destroy the progenitor, but he does not want to endanger his family. Yellow vaccinates Kylie, explaining that the vaccine was made by Sparks. The girl tells Fina that Duncan became a skin rider after her death, and no one knows how it happened. At the same time, Abram admits that he no longer believes in the obelisk, but he believes in Silas and is ready to do everything to destroy the progenitor. He tells Ezra about the weapons operation. A part of Silas will guide them inside, but what to do next, he doesn't know. Ezra laughs at such a plan, and his daughter hears this. Abram and Fina try to convince Ezra that this is why they were resurrected. Otherwise, humanity is doomed. But they cannot persuade him. Then Abram and Fina leave together. Ezra is tormented by guilt, although Lynn tries to remind him of his duty to his family. At this time, Kylie is reviewing the map to the progenitor's lake and secretly leaves the bunker. Red informs the parents that he cannot find the girl, and they, realizing where she has gone, rush after her. Meanwhile, Kylie catches up with Fina and Abram, and later Ezra and Lynn appear. Thus they all come together again. But at the lake itself, they fall into an ambush by the skin riders. A battle ensues in which the group of survivors wins, but Abram is seriously wounded. However, Kylie has sparks with her, and she suggests releasing them into the lake. As they start doing this, Duncan emerges from the water and shoots Lynn and Kylie. Fina, under the cover of a shield, rushes to him, and they both disappear under the water. Ezra releases the sparks and brings the wounded into the water. Then a wounded Fina emerges, saying she couldn't overcome Duncan. Ezra dives and finds a wounded Duncan, who has reverted to his true self before death. He apologizes and loses consciousness, and Ezra sees in front of him a glowing something with crystals and fits the lower part of the weapon onto one of them. Then he inserts Silas's little crystal into the middle part of the weapon and looks for the place where it needs to be placed. But then Jax appears. He has always hated his carrier and all humans, and he will not let the progenitor be destroyed. The men engage in combat, and just as Jax is about to win, the revived Duncan attacks him. Ezra finds the right crystal and fits the middle part of the weapon onto it, and suddenly finds himself in a room where he is met by Silas. The brother explains that they are inside the progenitor, and only he could create this home in this place. He is a Trojan horse from which destruction will enter the progenitor. Ezra picks up the box with the symbol of knowledge from his mother and realizes that it is a detonator. The brother says goodbye to him, and when Jax appears, they activate the bomb. Ezra finds himself in the cave where the progenitor is destroyed, to Jax's great sorrow. The man emerges and finds his loved ones healed. Their elation is washed by a black drone, which again heads to the spaceship, where it is met by Eleanor and Duncan. They realize that the deed is done and humanity has a chance. Despite some illogicality, the story is quite extraordinary. It's not about battles with aliens, as the Kareks are only briefly shown once in a flashback, and not about humans' attempts to cunningly escape the dictate of their rule. At the heart is the question of the value of a person, the preservation of which can lead to peace and the rebuilding of civilization. The movie begins in Leningrad in 1940. A young woman named Anya works as a seamstress in a factory where a young machinist, Vasily, who is very serious, notices her and even asks her to introduce him to her only relative, her brother Peter. However, Anya asks for a little more time, and the young man agrees to wait until the next day. But as the girl leaves for her lunch break, he quietly follows her, admiring her. Anya walks down the street, looking at a dirigible hovering above, from which German journalists are filming the city below. At this moment, a tram driven by Peter pulls up to an intersection. Suddenly, Anya realizes that a fast-moving truck is about to crash into the tram, and her brother will likely perish. Frozen in fear, she suddenly emits light waves that lift the truck into the air and throw it away from the intersection. The tram's windows shatter, injuring people, but a major accident is averted. This entire incident is captured on film by the journalists in the dirigible. As the shocked people try to recover, Peter jumps out of the tram, grabs Anya, and quickly takes her away. The girl regains consciousness in their shared room. Peter packs their belongings, urging his sister to flee Leningrad, although she is reluctant since they have already had to move several times due to her supernatural abilities manifesting at the most inappropriate times and attracting the attention of the authorities. Peter asks her to control her powers, but Anya is unable to master them as they are beyond her control. At that moment, representatives of the People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs burst into the room and arrest the siblings. An investigator named Ivan arrives at the scene. He interviews the victims, and one of the women recalls the strange girl standing at the crossroad. Back at the office, Ivan begins interrogating Anya, but she cannot provide any concrete information. She insists it was just an unfortunate accident, and then Ivan shows her photos from their previous residences where strange incidents and destruction occurred, prompting the siblings to move hastily. The investigator is willing to believe she is not a criminal, especially since he has also witnessed something very strange in his life. However, Ivan is unable to elaborate as his superior, Petrov, who turns out to be his father-in-law, takes Anya and leads her to the secret facilities managed by Professor Ilyinsky. The scientist welcomes the girl, explaining that she is special and now they will study her abilities. However, Anya refuses to cooperate until she sees her brother, and Ilyinsky promises to arrange a meeting for them. Meanwhile, Ivan cannot calm down, although Petrov, who is also his father-in-law, demands he forget the incident and focus on other matters. He had already barely managed to suppress his absurd report about an incident in Madrid. Returning home, Ivan tries to tell everything to his wife Vera, but she asks him to take a vacation and forget everything that happened. The action shifts to 1936. A group of Soviet soldiers, including Ivan, engages in battle with Spanish fascists in Madrid. Suddenly, a man in a strict coat and hat, wearing a strange mask, appears before them. Looking at the soldiers, he utters something incomprehensible, after which Ivan's comrades start shooting themselves one by one. Only Ivan finds the strength to shoot at the man in the mask. The man quickly disappears, leaving Ivan amidst his fallen comrades. The year is 1940. A man in a mask named Neumann and his assistant Katerina arrive in Munich, where the woman meets a Jewish boy named Baruch on the street, who plays chess brilliantly. She offers him a ride with them, noting he can always leave if he does not like their school. An orphan agrees and gets into the car, where Neumann utters several hissing words, causing Baruch to fall asleep instantly. Neumann agrees that the boy is brilliant, but by no means possesses superpowers. However, Katerina is determined to help the boy. Meanwhile, in Moscow, Professor Ilyinsky leads Anya to the laboratory where she will be studied, and fulfilling his promise, brings her to a cell to see her brother. Peter again asks her not to show her abilities, and she promises to write to him. Baruch is brought to an ancient castle owned by Neumann. The boy is laid in a hammock in a hall inhabited by many other teenagers, but when the adults leave, he wakes up and is frightened by the dark silhouettes surrounding him. Back in Moscow, Professor Ilyinsky leads Anya to a separate room, more like a cell, and locks her in there. He then reports to Petrov that he has never seen anything like it. The girl is a scientific discovery, a unique case, to which the chief objects. She is a new weapon. Later, Anya is subjected to various tests, but she shows nothing special. Ivan cannot forget the incident, studying everything related to the strange explosion. The video footage of the accident also reaches Neumann, and he decides to fly to the USSR. There, the man is taken to meet with Professor Ilyinsky. Neumann introduces himself as a worker from the Ahnenerbe organization and immediately determines that the professor is terminally ill. He offers to ease his pain if the professor allows him to speak with Anya. Ilyinsky does not believe in his abilities, but Neumann utters something, and glowing waves emanate from him, enveloping the professor, causing him to lose consciousness. Taking advantage of this, Neumann searches his desk and takes some papers. Soon, Ilyinsky regains consciousness, but strangely feels no pain. He agrees to arrange a meeting with Anya and leads the German to the laboratory. Neumann approaches the girl and secretly shows her an execution order for her brother. Then waves of unprecedented force begin to emanate from the girl, literally blowing up the entire laboratory. Neumann grabs her and escapes. Ivan sees from the window a man in a hat whom he immediately recognizes and runs to the laboratory where explosions are heard, but Neumann and the girl are nowhere to be found. The narrative shifts to 1924. In a remote Karelian village, a woman lives with two children, Peter and Anya. One day they go with the village boys into the forest. Suddenly a pack of wolves leaps out at the children. The children freeze in fear, but waves emanate from Anya, scattering the beasts. When the men arrive at the clearing, they find the girl dead. 1940. Petrov enters the devastated laboratory, where people connected by tubes into a single organism and marked with the letter M lie in chairs. At first glance, this structure was not damaged by the explosion, as the injured Ilyinsky lying nearby confirms. The professor reports that Anya caused all this and refuses to continue the experiments. Then, Petrov shoots him. Afterward, he goes to Ilyinsky's colleague, who everyone simply calls Professor Lyubov. Petrov asks her to activate the M Squad. Learning about the professor's death, the woman refuses to help Petrov, but he reminds her of her family, and Lyubov reluctantly agrees. On the train, a customs officer searches Neumann's compartment and finds an iron sarcophagus with Anya inside. Unsure of what to do, he goes for help. Meanwhile, Anya envisions her own funeral following the incident with the wolves. Frightened, she comes to, and Neumann informs her that he is saving her. Anya tries to run, but the customs officers, who decided to detain the strange German, stop her. However, he utters something, and the military personnel bring their pistols to their own heads. Neumann and Anya leave. At the same time in Moscow, Petrov reports to his colleagues that a member of the Ahnenerbe, which translates to ancestral heritage, Neumann has stolen a valuable exhibit from the USSR, the girl Anya. A squad has already been formed to pursue the German and will depart in a matter of days. Learning of this, Ivan requests to be included, but Petrov, feeling sorry for his daughter, refuses to do so. Neumann leads Anya to a spot where Katerina's car is waiting, and she drives the pair to the castle. It is apparent that the woman does not like Neumann's new toy, but he immediately says that Anya is just like him. At the castle, they are greeted by children whom Neumann calls his army. Anya is escorted to her room, and Neumann finds a guest in his office, Admiral Canaris, who is very interested in the scientist's research. But today he has come to express his displeasure with Neumann's sabotage in the USSR, as it could start a war. Neumann reassures him and invites him to a formal dinner. Meanwhile, Anya is startled by a sound and sees Baruch in her room, trying to open her window to escape the castle. But Katerina and Neumann appear and stop him. While Katerina takes the boy away, Neumann tries to convince Anya that the castle is a paradise, and no one wants to leave of their own volition. Katerina brings Baruch to a bedroom, reminding him that he must speak only German and not tell anyone his real name if he wants to live. But when she leaves, the other teenagers attack him. In Moscow, Ivan asks his wife to help him get enrolled in the squad, after which he goes to Professor Lyubov. He is interested in whether hypnosis can make a person do what another wants. The professor asks him not to travel to Germany, but he is determined to find the man in the mask. In the castle, Anya finds Baruch hanging. The boy tries to explain that the others hate him and beat him, therefore he wants to run away. But Anya admits that it was the same for her until she became strong, and he can too. Later they find Neumann in the park, who promises Anya he will teach her to control her power. He explains that he inherited the castle from the person who adopted him, and now it serves as a refuge. He has set up Anya's room according to her taste and hopes she will like it here. Grateful, Anya sits down at the sewing machine, unexpectedly remembering how the villagers burned their house, calling her a witch. Then her brother saved her, though their mother died in the fire. Back in Moscow, Petrov enrolls Ivan in the squad and asks the commander to ensure that he does not return. Leningrad, 1937. Returning from Madrid, Ivan writes in his report everything he witnessed, but Petrov does not believe him, noting that if the soldiers shot themselves, they could be declared deserters. Tired of trying to convince the young man, Petrov takes him to Professor Lyubov. 1940. A special forces unit travels to Germany in a grain car. Ivan warns his comrades about Neumann's peculiarities, but it seems they don't quite believe him. At the castle, the children undergo daily training, while Anya enjoys the long-forgotten peace. In the morning, Katerina brings her a box with a new dress sent by Neumann for her to wear at his birthday party. The girl goes out to the hall where the children are preparing decorations for the evening, and then they head to training. Baruch is afraid of heights and falls from a rope ladder, but no one pities him. After that, it's time for shooting practice, but the boy throws his pistol down and runs to the local cemetery where Neumann finds him. Baruch asks to be let go, but the scientist promises to teach him not to be afraid. Meanwhile, Squad M climbs out of the wagon, and Ivan remembers his training in 1936 before being sent to Madrid. Then his comrades met him coldly because he was the boss's son-in-law, but Ivan earned respect through hard work and cleverness. And now he is on a special mission. Suddenly, they are hailed by an old man who turns out to be their liaison and must take them to the castle. At the same time, Petrov is informed that the squad has successfully crossed the border. Guests start arriving at the castle. Neumann welcomes Canaris and escorts him to the hall where music plays, and ladies and gentlemen drink and talk about the beautiful evening. Neumann himself is enchanted by Anya's beauty, and she gives him a hand-embroidered handkerchief she made for him. Later, guests deliver laudatory speeches in honor of the birthday boy, and he invites Anya to dance to the envy of the present ladies. Canaris notices Katerina's displeasure, but the woman remains cold, rejecting his advances. She dislikes Canaris's interest in their wards, and he tells her that people are already coming for Anya from the USSR. Squad M reaches the forest house of their liaison, who supplies them with weapons and draws a path on a map, but then shots ring out. German soldiers have caught up with the saboteurs. A battle ensues and the Russians win. Later, the commander finishes off the wounded enemies and, unexpectedly for Ivan, shoots the liaison, indicating that they have no orders to return. At the castle, Canaris agrees to play chess with Baruch, and the boy wins. The admiral admires his genius, but upon learning that the boy is Jewish, he pulls out a pistol. Anya sees the man aiming at the child, and her powers activate. Guests watch in horror as everything in the hall begins to rise into the air. The Admiral himself is lifted up, but at that moment Neumann grabs the girl by the shoulder. She faints, and Canaris falls to the floor. Everything stops immediately, but people scream and scatter. The furious Admiral orders all children to be destroyed within 3 days and departs. Neumann escorts Anya to her room and admires her because today she managed to stop. The girl does not understand why it is necessary to destroy the Jews, and Neumann reminds her that no one pitied them either, as they were not like everyone else. The man returns to his office where Katerina awaits him, but he does not accept her attentions because he is seriously captivated by Anya and hopes to succeed with her. However, Katerina is saddened by this turn in their relationship and reminds him of Canaris's order, but Neumann intends to make a profitable deal. The action shifts to Numeno's childhood when children laughed at him and drove him away. His parents were forced to put a mask with a digital lock on him so he couldn't harm anyone, and the boy suffered greatly from this. One day his father complained to the landlord that his son was hindering his ability to fulfill his duties as a tenant, and the man came to see the unusual child. They explained to him that Neumann scared all the guests and caused his father to lose a finger. The year is 1940. The morning after the dinner, Anya goes out to the hall, but the servants who witnessed yesterday's incident look at her warily. Then the girl goes to the park where she is met by an armed Katerina, but seeing the guards, she returns to the house. Later, Neumann conducts a meditation for the teenagers, asking Thor to give them strength. Anya sees this and asks for permission to start training. Neumann orders Katerina to stay at the castle and wait for guests, and he takes Anya away. Meanwhile, the squad continues to move through the forest. Soon they find a rubber boat at the prearranged place. Neumann puts Anya on his personal plane and takes her to his parents' house. Landing, they walk across a bridge and suddenly Neumann asks the girl to remember her brother. Her powers activate. Water rises up, carrying fish and creating a reverse waterfall. But then the man calls her, Anya comes to her senses, and everything returns to normal. However, now she can use her powers when she needs to. Soon they enter an old house and Neumann recalls how he was taken from his father's home. Lastly, his mother writes down the password to his mask on a piece of paper, and little Neumann leaves their lives forever. In the present, he tells that his father was a harsh and cruel man, often beating him and his mother, so he promised himself that his child would never be unhappy. The man remembers how his patron removed his mask and wanted to throw it away, but Neumann did not allow it. The man informed him that he would now take care of him, but he must trust him. Soon they arrived at the castle, where the patron confessed that every person has the right to be happy, and the boy lived for the first time like a normal child. But a year later, war came. His patron went away on business, and their home turned into a hospital. Neumann helped as best he could. Once he had to assist in the amputation of a leg. The soldier was in great pain, and then Neumann activated his powers and relieved the poor man of his suffering during the operation. Later he confessed to one of the nurses that he loved her. The adult woman laughed at the boy but said she loved him too. But one day he caught his nurse with one of the recovering soldiers, and in a fit of rage he made the soldier kill himself with a hammer. They caught him, gagged him, tied him up, and took him away from the castle. In 1940 he tells Anya that his parents died, so he is so happy to have found her. The girl lights candles in the fireplace, using her new powers, which delights Neumann. They drink wine and then become close. At night, Anya dreams where Baruch dies and wakes up terrified. She asks Neumann to return to the castle. Meanwhile, the squad reaches the river. One of the soldiers is wounded and runs out of strength. Then he takes his own life so as not to be a burden to his comrades. Only 3 remain, but they still row towards the castle. And there Katerina, who can't sleep, reminisces about the past when she helped her mother, who worked in a psychiatric hospital, where one day they brought in a tied-up boy named Neumann. She then freed him, and he promised never to harm her. The year is 1936, Leningrad. Petrov attends a lecture by Professor Ilinsky, where he discusses a significant discovery in the field of controlling human memory and emotions. Ilinsky's colleague, Professor Lubov, is inspired by the future changes, as people with good mental health will be able to work better and create a brilliant future for themselves and their children. The Project M envisions a new society where happy people with immense productivity and willpower will live. Petrov asks about the use of these discoveries in the military sphere, arguing that if a new society is to be built, it must be able to defend itself. However, Lyubov categorically opposes totalitarianism. After the lecture, Petrov offers Ilyinsky full support for their program if he agrees to operate under military auspices. But Ilyinsky sends him to Lyubov as the ideational inspiration behind the project. However, the woman flatly refuses to cooperate with the military. That same day, she is hit by a car in the street. Later, Petrov returns to Ilyinsky, informing him of the unfortunate accident with his colleague, and Ilyinsky reluctantly agrees to cooperate. Again, 1940-year Germany. The three remaining members of the squad reach the castle's territory. Surprised by the lack of security, they enter the premises. Petrov receives a summary of incidents in a specific area of Germany and realizes that everything is going according to plan. His boss is horrified. His people have left a very noticeable trail, which could easily lead to the USSR being accused of provocation. But Petrov assures him that everything was planned this way and there will be no international conflict. At that moment, his daughter calls and he rushes home. The squad members reach the castle and, splitting up, begin to explore the premises. Meanwhile, Petrov finds Vera in a hysterical state. She is going mad with worry for her husband, and the father decides to take action. At the same time in the castle, Katerina reads a book to the children, and seeing her nervousness, they calm the woman. She orders lights out and leaves, just as Ivan enters the hall from the other side. Seeing the children in front of him, the man lowers his weapon and leaves. The children remain motionless. The soldiers continue to explore the castle, and now the squad leader enters the hall with the children. But he does not lower his weapon and prepares to shoot. Then the children attack first. The commander fires in all directions, but the teenagers throw their clothes at him and knock him down. The eldest orders the pistol handed to Baruch to kill the enemy, but the boy cannot shoot the man, and the man manages to wound him with a knife before being killed. The children carry the bleeding Baruch to the bedroom, leaving the soldier's body on the hall floor. The third squad member, a female warrior, finds Katerina's office and engages her in a shootout. Katerina flees, but the woman catches up to her, and they fight. The woman is defeated when Katerina pushes her away. Seeing her opponent unconscious, the German grabs a pistol but doesn't manage to shoot because Ivan appears. Threatening him with a pistol, the woman captures him. In Moscow, Petrov brings his daughter to Professor Lyubov and asks her to erase the girl's memory. Lyubov is outraged by this request, as the love for a husband is the most precious thing in Vera's life. However, under military pressure, she agrees and performs the necessary manipulations, while Petrov's subordinates methodically clear their apartment of photographs and items belonging to Ivan. But one photograph falls under a chest of drawers, and the soldier does not notice it. After the procedure, the girl regains consciousness but does not remember her husband at all. At this time, the teenagers attack Ivan, not noticing Katerina, and wound him in the arm. The woman drives off the aggressive children and escorts the wounded man to Neumann's office, where she admits to Ivan that she recognized him because she had seen him in Madrid. He asked why her master kidnapped Anya. Could it be that he wants to use her in the war? Katerina assures him that he still doesn't understand. People are petty and greedy creatures fighting for power. Neumann is unique. He is ready to seize all power on Earth to save the world from war. Meanwhile, Neumann and Anya arrive at the castle and find a wounded woman on the threshold. The scientist finishes her off with a pistol while Anya runs to the bedroom to the teenagers and finds Baruch dead. At this time, Ivan is bandaging himself while Katerina explains that they teach the children survival by developing their skills, because their destiny is to save the world under Neumann's leadership. The woman offers to help him escape if he will help her, but before Ivan can hear her out, Neumann enters the door. The Russian immediately picks up a pistol and takes the woman hostage. However, the German informs him that he does not care about her fate, which visibly upsets her. At that moment, Anya runs into the office and uses her power to knock Ivan off his feet, but when she recognizes the man, Neumann quickly takes her away, leaving the Russian with Katerina. In Moscow, Professor Lyubov mourns Ilyinsky when Petrov brings her folders with the names of the condemned, whom she can save by including them in Squad M. She remembers how after the accident, Ilyinsky came to her in the hospital. The man was shocked to learn that she had been mutilated by the military, but he was frightened and could not refuse to cooperate. Now the woman is alone and forced to make difficult decisions. She takes out a vial of M activator and recalls Ivan's story about the man in the mask. After his return from Madrid, she worked with his memory, suggesting removing the traumatic memories of his comrades' deaths. But Ivan refused to erase his life. And now the young man is chained in a cell in the castle of the man in the mask. Later, Anya visits him, accusing him of killing Baruch, but the boy denies it, and he is not particularly interested in her fate. He only wants to destroy Neumann because all evil comes from him. He hypnotizes children, turning them into killers. Their conversation is interrupted by Naumann's appearance. After sending Anya away, he thanks the young man for revealing his vulnerability, as he is the only one who could stand up to him. To prove it, the scientist shows the finger shot off by Ivan in Madrid. He too is special, and Neumann really wants the Russian to join his side. Yes, he killed his friends, but it was war. He came to Annanerba to find gifted people. Anya is like him, and they are the future. He asks Ivan to admit why he is immune to his hypnosis. Then Ivan reveals that there is a whole squad like him, Squad M. There are many of them, and they will all be here soon. So Neumann cannot hide. After talking with Ivan, Neumann finds Anya in the castle's backyard. The girl asks him to hand over all affairs to Katerina and to leave this place forever. But Neumann does not want to run because they are extraordinary people, and when they are together they are unbeatable. He asks for her help in defending their new home. Later, he thanks Katerina for managing the situation and confesses that he is glad she was not hurt during the Russian raid. Meanwhile, Anya remembers how in Moscow she wrote letters to her brother while locked up in the laboratory. She used to give them to the professor, but she could not have imagined that he read her letters to Peter, who was undergoing mental processing as a participant in Squad M. At this time, she burns them in the backyard of the castle, hoping that life will give her a chance to start over. Later, the castle's inhabitants conduct a funeral rite for Baruch. The teenagers carry the boy's body to the seashore, where the cemetery is located, and burn it on a ritual pyre. Anya is shocked by the number of children's graves and realizes that Ivan was telling the truth. Katerina urges her to leave and save herself. Anya runs to Ivan's cell and asks him to tell her what he saw in Madrid that was so special. The boy talks about the death of his comrades and Neumann's chilling whisper, but the German doesn't know that he just had a misfire. He is not special and survived only because of the pistol's malfunction, but if Neumann finds out, he will kill him immediately. And only Anya can stand up to him. Out of the darkness comes Katerina, who has heard everything. She will let them go if they leave forever. Neumann is planning to sell the children to Canaris, and Anya can do nothing about it. They are weapons, and it is high time the Russian understood this. But Anya runs away while Katerina frees Ivan from his chains and advises him to make sure the German never finds them. Meanwhile in Moscow, Petrov enjoys his daughter's good mood, hoping she will meet another man, marry, and give him grandchildren. The girl is lively and cheerful, unaware that the photo under the dresser awaits its moment. At this time, Neumann orders the Russian man to be killed, and he goes to look for Anya. Meanwhile, Katerina leads Ivan to her car, where Neumann's guard catches up with them. He engages in a fight with the Russian, and when he is about to kill him, Katerina attacks the guard. The guard is much stronger, and Katerina has to shoot. The teenagers hear the sound and run into the courtyard while Katerina puts Ivan in the car and drives him away from the estate. Neumann finds Anya at the cemetery. The girl asks him to let the children go, but he refuses. They are insignificant to him because he hopes to build a new world using their combined powers. Moreover, they will definitely have a son who will be the strongest and greatest on the planet. Hearing this, Anya wants to leave. Then Neumann sees Katerina's car and realizes what she is about to do. He puts on his quantum mask, which greatly amplifies the power of his voice, and begins to speak while Ivan stands on the car step and aims an assault rifle at him. The mask works. Katerina's car loses control and crashes from a high cliff into the water, but Ivan manages to jump from the step and survives. Then, members of the second Squad M, who were heading to the castle, covering for the distracting maneuvers of the first squad, open fire on Neumann. But the soldiers are programmed for total destruction, and one of them engages in a fight with Ivan, not realizing he is an ally. The young man has to kill the soldier. Neumann asks Anya to activate her power, and the girl begins to do so when she recognizes one of the soldiers as her brother. Neumann is knocked down by her force, rocks crash from the sky, and the girl runs to Peter, realizing that this time he is indeed dead. Anya's powers activate again when Newman falls from Ivan's shot. The girl mourns her brother as teenagers appear on the road. Ivan grabs Anya and drags her away while the children pick up Newman's body and carry it into the castle. The Russians run to the airplane and manage to take off at the last moment. 9 months later, Newman, who survived the injury, listens to Hitler's speeches and experiments with a new kind of influence on people, broadcasting his voice through radio equipment. Meanwhile, in Anya's native village, a bearded Ivan arrives from the woods as his woman is about to give birth. Pregnant Anya is dragged into the village where women come to help. As the birth proceeds, an announcement about the start of the war with Germany is broadcast from the speakers. Later, surrounded by streams of power, Anya gives birth to a healthy baby boy. Newman is immediately informed by a fortune-telling girl. Then one of the villagers recognizes Anya and hurries to tell his fellow villagers whom they have just helped. But Ivan stops him when bombers appear in the sky, from which a large number of paratroopers descend.
I can make you very special.
Hundreds of years ago, people completely exhausted the planet's resources, leading to a total degradation of the population. The best scientists took it upon themselves to save the dying world. A renewable energy source was found. However, the greatest danger remained humanity itself. Differences led to divisions between the best and the worst. It was then decided to improve humans as a species. On their 16th birthday, everyone undergoes a procedure that makes them physically perfect. No longer does anyone need to envy others or prove their superiority. Tally is one of those waiting for that day. For now, she is called an ugly, but she has the opportunity to see what she will look like, as she can choose her eye color or skin quality. That evening, she sneaks onto a bridge where her friend Paris is waiting for her. They watch a party in the City of the Beautiful, envying those who are already there. Paris is 3 months older than Tally, and tomorrow he will undergo the operation and move to the city. Tally will have to wait her turn, and she fears that Paris will forget about her. But he assures her that she will always be his squints, and he will always be her nose. He arranges to meet her in a month. The next day, the students gather in the main hall to greet those whose time has come. Dr. Cable talks about all the advantages of being beautiful and calls forward the future beauties. Paris says goodbye to Tally, and a girl named Shay, sitting next to her, notices this. In the evening, Tally returns to her room and remembers how she and Paris met when they arrived at school. He called himself Nose and she called herself Squints. One day the boy hurt his hand and the girl intentionally cut her palm. From that moment on, they shared a mark of ugliness, a scar on their palms, and the belief that they were perfect for each other. The next morning in class, Tally talks about the white tiger orchid, which supplies energy to the cities and decorates the fields. That evening, she undergoes the mandatory scan for her future transformation, where she chooses gold for her eye color and dreams of reuniting with Paris, from whom there has been no news. The day of the arranged meeting arrives. The girl sneaks onto the bridge, but Nose is not there. Tally decides to sneak into the City of Joy. She reaches the outskirts, where a party is in full swing. Suddenly, a mask falls from above, allowing its owner to change their clothing. Tally puts it on, selects a dress, and heads out to search for her friend in streets filled with lights, laughter, music, and celebration. Miraculously, she finds Paris, who barely recognizes her. Even the scar on his hand is gone, though he swore he wouldn't remove it. It turns out that after the transformation, an ugly person's life becomes entirely different, where an eternal friendship oath no longer matters. Tally removes the mask to remind him of herself, but immediately becomes an unwanted presence. She runs, grabbing a rescue vest on her way. Realizing she is about to be caught, Tally jumps from a skyscraper. The vest saves her, and she manages to reach the bridge, but she is pursued, and just as she is about to be caught, Shay arrives to rescue her on her hoverboard. The girls immediately feel a kindred spirit. Tally shows Shay how to sneak into the locked kitchen and tells her that her meeting with Paris left her disappointed. One day, Shay suggests that Tally learn to ride the hoverboard and gives her a forbidden book to read. Tally learns that Shay told her friends about her jump with the rescue vest, and now she is the heroine of the entire campus, which could lead to her being denied the operation. But she continues with her lessons and masters the hoverboard. Later, the girls discuss beauty, and unexpectedly, Shay reveals that she doesn't want to change at all. For now, she takes Tally to a training ground where, choosing the most difficult track, she puts on a masterclass. After riding, Tally returns the book, in which she enjoyed the free flow of everything in the world, from natural seasons to relationships. Then Shay suggests that they both refuse the operation and escape with her to the smoke, a place where people live freely. She takes her friend to the edge of the school grounds, and after leaving their tracking rings on a branch, the girls fly into the wildlands. Crossing a river, they arrive at the ruins of an old city. Shay shows her the remnants of a roller coaster, lamenting that it is destroyed. She takes her friend to a tall building where they can call her friends from the wild world by lighting a signal fire. Shay explains that in the outside world, people work for themselves, love, and have children. There are even old people there. Everything is like in the book they read. Shay was planning to escape with her friend David when she saw Tally on the bridge and came to her rescue. She wants to read books and have hobbies because after the operation, a person no longer decides how to live. Tally doesn't understand this, as she has dreamed all her life of being beautiful. So Shay leaves her with a coated path to the smoke and departs with David, whose fire lights up on the neighboring rooftop. Tally returns to the city where the day of her transformation soon arrives. Unexpectedly, instead of the operation, she is taken to Dr. Cable, who turns out to be well aware of her friendship with the missing Shay. She insists that David is holding Shay against her will, brainwashing her. And only after Tally finds Shay and returns her to the city will she be allowed to become beautiful. A distressed Tally returns to her room, where Paris visits her. He advises her to do as Dr. Cable asks, as it is the only way they can be together. Tally agrees. Dr. Cable explains that the residents of the smoke are planning to destroy the city and have developed a weapon that Tally must find and neutralize. She sets off, receiving a pendant to activate when she finds the weapon. Tally follows Shay's instructions and after reaching the ruined roller coaster, rides it until she reaches an old railroad track. She camps in the forest for the night, lighting a fire, and unexpectedly finds charm in the surrounding nature. Later, she has to climb a steep cliff and cross the ruins on her hoverboard. The last stop is a white sea of orchids, where Tally settles in for the night. Meanwhile, Dr. Cable calls Paris and offers to further enhance him. That night, Tally wakes up surrounded by burning orchids. As she is about to lose consciousness, David finds her. He checks her over, discards the transmitters he finds, ignoring the pendant, which is not yet active, and takes her with him. However, the tracker informs Dr. Cable that Tally is in the right place. In the morning, David brings Tally to the smoke, where she reunites with Shay. However, the others find it strange that she managed to get there alone. Tally expresses her concern for Shay and believes she should return, but Shay has no intention of doing so and asks Tally to take a closer look at this way of life. The next day, Tally comes across a group of young people preparing for an expedition. It turns out that the fires are set by them because the orchids are toxic and drain nutrients from the soil, killing the planet. David offers her to join them and see the truth. The group flies on a mission aboard an ancient modified helicopter. From above, they see fields and forests destroyed by the orchids. Shay sets the plants on fire and a blaze erupts, suddenly revealing figures of people walking through the fire unharmed. Suddenly, the helicopter shakes and Shay falls down. Tally immediately jumps after her. She finds her friend and grabs her just as she sees a figure in a blue suit running towards them. But Tally grabs onto a rope thrown down from the helicopter and the two girls are pulled out of danger. Later, they discuss what happened, confused about how the city's scouts found them. Tally feels guilty and torn, as after getting to know the inhabitants of the smoke better, she has started to think differently. Here, everyone works but doesn't use money, they just trade. The elderly aren't a burden because they contribute in their own way. Most importantly, the people have chosen to be here. They melt down old iron and make useful things. When Tally asks about weapons, Shay simply shrugs, saying, "Why would we need them?" Tally joins in the work, and even though it's hard, she enjoys the process. In the evening, everyone gathers around the campfires where she is treated to natural foods. David tells the people that scouts have been spotted, meaning the city hasn't stopped pursuing them. While the smoke believes in controlling nature, the city has perfected controlling people. By focusing on appearance, people stop reading, learning, dreaming, and choosing who they want to become. That's why they are ready to defend their freedom. The next day, David teaches Tally how to shoot a bow, noticing the calluses on her hands, and gives her his gloves as a gift. At that moment, the flamethrowers arrive, having encountered scouts again. However, these are not typical beauties, but very fast and strong guys. Later, Shay notices the gloves and explains that in this world, things are different from the city. If a guy cares for a girl, it means she's important to him, so Tally has to make a choice. One day, Tally asks David about the weapons. He takes her to his parents. They reveal that they used to be plastic surgeons. It turns out these operations are not as safe as people believe. There were even fatalities. While studying these cases, David's father noticed changes in the brain of the beautiful, realizing that after the procedures, people's thinking became clouded and they experienced a false sense of happiness. But only Cable realized the secret was uncovered and they were removed from their work and their research results were confiscated. It became clear that the brain was being intentionally damaged to control people. David's parents were lucky to find themselves in a community of dissenters where they were given a medicine that helped them stay sane. That's why they fled and dedicated the rest of their lives to creating a cure. But one of the main components remained in the city. The serum is the weapon, though it's not yet completed. Once they obtain what's missing, they will need to test it on a person, but only if that person agrees. That night, Tally reflects on everything she's learned, takes off the pendant, and throws it into the fire, not realizing that by doing so, she activates it. She tells David what happened, but he reassures her that she has chosen the right path. He tells her she is beautiful and kisses her. The next morning, the city attacks the smoke. Men in blue suits trap the residents of the smoke in nets and gather them in the square. Tally holds back David, and they watch the events unfold from a distance. Cable interrogates David's parents, and when she gets no answers, she orders Paris to kill David's father. He reaches out and with one swift movement, snaps the man's neck. David rushes out, and together with his mother, they cry over his father's body. Paris sees Tally but doesn't touch her, while Cable thanks her for her cooperation, revealing her true mission. As Shay expresses her disgust towards her, David's mother secretly slips a vial of the medicine into her son's pocket. Tally breaks free, runs to David's house, and sets it on fire. In the chaos, David escapes into the forest. Tally, shooting her pursuer with a bow, also runs while the townspeople burn down the settlement and take its residents away. Later, Tally finds David and tells him that she didn't know the whole truth and the residents of the smoke paid the price. She is ready to help him get to the city and fix her mistake. She takes him to the school, introduces him to Shay's friends, and asks them for help. The young people start a rebellion, writing the words "Smoke Forever" above the city, diverting attention from the main goal. Taking advantage of this, Tally and David sneak into the laboratory. But to access the right level, the school ring is not enough. David takes it from a guard, and the pair find and free the residents of the smoke. But Shay has already been taken for the operation. Tally, David, and his mother rush after her, but it's too late. Shay has been turned into a beauty, and she really likes it. At that moment, Paris and Dr. Cable enter the laboratory, urging people to finally make a choice. All three step into the transformation booths, but just as the process begins, a helicopter flies overhead, and David's friend uses a flamethrower to melt the outer glass. The system collapses, Tally pulls Shay out, and while David's mother finds the necessary component for the medicine, they escape. The group makes it to the roof, where they are stopped by Paris. Tally tries to remind him of their friendship, but he reaches out, and David, remembering his father's death, attacks the handsome man. After a struggle, Paris dangles over a waterway, and at the last moment, he recognizes Tally, but he slips and falls down. David leads Tally away. Later, the group gathers in the ruins of the ancient city. David's mother shows them the retrieve component and pulls the vial from her son's pocket. The medicine is finally ready, but Shay refuses to be the test subject, as she loves being beautiful. So Tally volunteers to return to the city, undergo the procedure, and then become a volunteer. It's very risky, but she is confident in her strength. Sometime later, the beautiful Tally admires the city and, when asked by the system, assures it that she is completely happy being perfect. The movie raises more questions than it answers. The city's motivation is unclear, as the beauties produce nothing but self-admiration, and the danger posed by the smoke isn't fully explained. But the visuals allow viewers to simply enjoy the beautiful scenes, forgetting about the absurdities of the plot. The story is set in a world grappling with a unique and terrifying epidemic. This epidemic, which has baffled scientists and experts for over 8 years, is spread through language and speech, making communication dangerous. The main symptom of the disease begins with a high fever, eventually causing the afflicted to speak incoherently, descending into madness. As a precaution, people have resorted to wearing headsets constantly, as the disease can be transmitted by hearing the speech of the infected. Those affected affected by the illness, known as jabbers, are swiftly quarantined and forcibly separated from their families, leading to public outrage and distress. The story introduces Murat, a linguist whose life has been profoundly altered by the pandemic. Isolated and lonely, he lives with his mother in an apartment, his life reduced to a series of cautious routines. Each day, Murat meticulously checks his temperature, a ritual that underscores the constant fear of infection. One day, Murat's attention is drawn to Sul, a young woman immersed in a book. At a bus stop, time seems to stand still as Murat is captivated by her presence. However, the moment is broken when she notices his prolonged gaze. Realizing he's been staring, Murat awkwardly shouts that no bus is coming and quickly departs, heading back home. The narrative continues as Murat, despite his reluctance, leaves his home to buy soap for his mother. While at the supermarket, he encounters an old woman who suddenly turns around and speaks incoherently, a clear sign of being a jabber. An alarm is triggered, announcing the presence of a jabber and urging people to evacuate immediately. In the ensuing chaos, everyone flees, except for the old woman and a young boy who is left behind without a headset. Murat witnesses the boy's mother crying outside. Driven by a sense of responsibility, Murat bravely re-enters the supermarket, gives his headset to the boy, and makes a narrow escape. Remarkably, Murat manages to avoid contracting the epidemic. Despite his close encounter with the jabber, he experiences a high fever but eventually recovers and returns home unscathed, soap in hand. Meanwhile, Anton, a high-ranking official at AEI, is desperately seeking a solution to the pandemic. He faces a setback upon learning that even young children are susceptible to the disease. However, his interest is piqued when he hears about Murat's incident at the supermarket. Intrigued by the possibility that Murat might be immune, Anton delves into surveillance footage to learn more. He observes Murat collapsing in the supermarket, but later continuing on as if unharmed, which deepens Anton's confusion and curiosity. In another part of the city, Murat visits the home of his mother's friend, responding to a desperate call for help. The friend's son, Arif's father, is exhibiting symptoms of the disease, speaking disconnectedly. Arif, holding on to hope, pleads with Murat to find a cure, believing in Murat's unique abilities. He even suggests collaborating with Murat's friend Ozgur, but Murat informs him that Ozgur has passed away. Arif, skeptical about Ozgur's death due to the lack of a proper funeral and the absence of his body, plans to meet with Errol, a businessman known for trading in information. Arif hopes Errol can shed light on whether Ozgur is indeed alive and assist in their quest for a cure. Meanwhile, Anton takes a deep dive into investigating the mysterious case of the headset left with a child at the supermarket. He discovers that the headset belongs to Murat, a linguist who was working on the pandemic case but vanished after a disastrous fire that claimed the lives of his team. Intrigued, Anton intensifies his investigation. Delving further, Anton uncovers records of Murat visiting the emergency room with severe fever more than 12 times. Using video footage from the supermarket, along with a temperature detector, Anton confirms his suspicions. Murat is immune to the pandemic. He deduces this from the fact that Murat has surpassed the critical threshold of 4 high fever encounters, a significant discovery given Murat's 12 instances. In the meantime, Murat, spurred by Arif's belief in Ozgur's survival, decides to investigate further. He meets a businessman who offers them access to AEI's resources, allowing them to gather information independently and save costs. With newfound determination, Murat boldly infiltrates the AEI headquarters and navigates his way to the information hub downstairs. There, Murat searches for Ozgur's name and is initially disheartened to find records indicating his death. He clicks on the autopsy image, expecting the worst, but is surprised to see an unrecognizable burnt face with no identifiable tattoo on the wrist. This absence of a tattoo, which Murat knows his friend had, rekindles his hope that Ozgur might still be alive. Before leaving the hub room, Murat impulsively searches for his own name in the database. To his shock and dismay, he discovers video footage of himself from the supermarket incident. Realizing the potential danger of this discovery, Murat hastily exits the room, unable to delete the record. His escape is filled with anxiety and urgency, knowing that his presence in the AEI database could have unforeseen and dangerous consequences. Soon after, Anton, fueled by his significant discovery regarding Murat's immunity to the pandemic, eagerly approaches his superior to share his findings. However, his excitement quickly turns to frustration when his superior dismisses his claims, cautioning against spreading unverified rumors. Frustrated by this response and determined to pursue the matter further, Anton decides to take matters into his own hands. He acquires the address of Murat and his mother's home, although under a false name, and sets out with his men to capture Murat. Upon arriving at the destination, they find Murat's mother answering the door, mistakenly assuming it might be her son. However, the AEI forces swiftly invade the home, scattering throughout the house and the apartment complex. They strategically position themselves, lying in wait for Murat's return to spring their trap. Unnoticed by the AEI operatives, Murat's mother subtly places a prearranged signal on the window, a discreet method of communication between her and her son. She then calmly lights a cigarette and sits down, maintaining an air of composure despite the tense situation. Meanwhile, Murat, who had been waiting for another glimpse of the beautiful girl he had seen at the bus stop, returns home. As he approaches his apartment, he notices the signal from his mother. Realizing the imminent danger, he hesitates at the entrance. Inside, Anton and his team are eagerly anticipating Murat's arrival, ready to execute their well-laid plans. In a moment of inner conflict, Murat grapples with the decision to enter the apartment. His thoughts drift to the beautiful girl, and the realization dawns on him that if he walks into the trap, he might never see her again. This thought acts as a turning point, and in a swift decision, Murat chooses to flee in the opposite direction, much to Anton's dismay. His abrupt departure catches Anton and his men off guard, and they lose track of him in mere seconds. Back at Murat's house, Anton seizes the opportunity to collect Murat's belongings for further investigation, hoping to get more insight into Murat's unique situation. The next morning, as Murat sets out on his search for Ozgur, he is stopped by AEI forces demanding to see his ID. In a moment of tension, as Murat nervously reaches for his ID, a bomb suddenly explodes nearby, causing the AEI forces to scatter and leaving Murat unattended. Seizing the moment, Murat heads to a location where he believes he might find Ozgur. However, his hopes are dashed when he discovers Ozgur is not there. Speaking with the man who made Ozgur's distinctive tattoo, Murat learns that since Ozgur's death, others have been imitating the tattoo, diminishing his chances of finding Ozgur. Meanwhile, Anton meticulously reviews tape recordings overnight and stumbles upon a recording of Murat claiming that he is incapable of jabbering, even if he wanted to. This revelation prompts Anton to rush to AEI to share his findings with a colleague. However, upon his arrival, Anton is informed that his boss Fazil is waiting for him. In a confrontational meeting, Fazil sternly instructs him to withdraw from the case. During this time, Murat finds comfort in a conversation with an old man who offers him a drink. As they share this moment, the old man tries to alleviate Murat's guilt over his wife's tragic death, which occurred after she was affected by the pandemic. He reassures Murat that it wasn't his fault. Murat listens in silence, eventually sharing his plans to venture into Zone 6 in his relentless search for Ozgur. Soon, Murat seeks the help of Errol, a man introduced to him by Arif. Errol is known for his willingness to do anything for money, and Murat needs him to create a false ID. They arrange to meet the following day. Afterward, Murat visits Arif's house, where he expresses his determination to find Ozgur and their shared goal of discovering a cure for the epidemic. Before he leaves, Arif's grandmother generously gives him some money, while his mother, having no cash, gives him her necklace as a token of support. However, their movements do not go unnoticed. One of Anton's men spots Murat and promptly informs Anton, who instructs his team to tail him discreetly. The next day, Murat meets Errol, as planned, to collect his forged ID. Just as they complete the transaction, Errol receives an alert that AEI forces are closing in on their location. In a frantic rush, they escape, successfully evading Anton and his team, who later search the warehouse to no avail. With his new fake ID in hand, Murat heads to the subway station, bound for the less monitored Zone 6. He smoothly passes the initial security checkpoint using the fake ID. However, his sense of safety is short-lived, as a security guard becomes suspicious upon recognizing Murat's face from wanted posters in the subway. In a coincidental twist, Sul, who Murat has been longing to see again, suddenly appears in front of him. To his astonishment and delight, she kisses him him, right there in the subway, creating a moment of confusion for the pursuing security guard. This unexpected encounter leaves Murat feeling ecstatic. Holding hands, they continue their journey on the subway, embarking on a path filled with uncertainty, yet united in their unexpected connection. Murat and Sewell, having left the bus stop, navigate through menacing people and areas until they find a secluded rooftop where they can talk privately. On the rooftop, Murat, preoccupied with his quest to find Osgur, is about to leave when Sewell insists he stay for a meal. During their conversation, he learns her name and he expresses gratitude for her assistance earlier. Sewell then reveals her true intentions. She had been following Murat purposefully, hoping to recruit him into her team, P1, which is dedicated to finding a cure for the pandemic. Surprised by this revelation, Murat abruptly leaves, not allowing her to finish explaining. Later, Murat returns to the home he shares with his wife, where he is flooded with memories as he wanders through each room. That night, he dreams of himself torn between his wife and Sewell, symbolizing his internal conflict. The next morning, Murat's search for Osgur takes an unexpected turn when he is kidnapped by masked individuals who question his identity and affiliation with the AEI. At this critical moment, Sewell intervenes, assuring them that Murat is not with the AEI and is on a personal mission. Murat convinces them of his intentions, and they agree to share information if they cross paths with Osgur. Sewell then brings Murat to his studio where she works, and after apologizing for the earlier misunderstanding, she hosts a podcast. In the broadcast, she discusses the AEI's cruel practices, relating them to the unjust death of her boyfriend, and concludes by emphasizing the importance of finding a cure to end the crisis. Meanwhile, Anton retreats to his house, where his wife and son are quarantined in the basement due to the pandemic. While there, Anton senses he is being watched. Upon investigating, he finds no one, unaware that Fazil's right-hand agent is covertly observing him from a hiding spot. Somewhere else, Murat and Sewell's journey through the pandemic-stricken streets of the city continues. While walking downtown, Murat demonstrates his unusual resistance to the pandemic by briefly removing his headset near Jabber's, showcasing how his skull heats up without experiencing the usual symptoms. This unique ability intrigues Sewell, who sees potential in Murat's immunity. That night, Murat stays at the studio with Sewell, and upon waking up the next morning, he finds himself surrounded by the team Sewell had mentioned. The team members introduce themselves and request Murat's assistance. Initially hesitant, Murat warms up to the idea when Sewell assures him that joining the team could aid in his quest to find Osgur. As part of their ongoing search for Osgur, Murat and Sewell come across a hotel displaying the symbol that Murat associates with Osgur. They decide to investigate by entering the hotel and seeking an audience with the hotel's boss. However, their encounter quickly turns dangerous. In a moment of quick thinking, Murat leverages his past experience and knowledge of recording voices to offer the boss a rare tape. This move impresses the boss, diffusing the tension and earning them a chance to sit and talk. As Murat and Sewell are about to explain their quest for Osgur, their conversation is interrupted by a lady entering the room to deliver an item and collect payment. After she leaves, the boss encourages them to continue. Murat and Sewell reveal their search for the person associated with the symbol they possess. To their surprise, the boss informs them that the lady who just left was the one who brought the symbol to the hotel. Reacting quickly, Murat and Sewell rush outside to catch the lady, but they are too late. She drives away, showing no interest in engaging with them. This missed opportunity leaves Murat and Sewell with more questions than answers as they continue their journey in the uncertain and dangerous world. My friends, the continuation of the story is now on the screen in front of you. A young man returns home and discovers on the carpet in the living room his own body. Next to it lies an envelope with the inscription, "Look at me." The initial shock is replaced by curiosity as Alex finds a flash drive in the envelope, which he immediately plugs into his computer and on the screen sees just himself. The second Alex reassures himself he is not high and has not gone insane and advises to listen carefully. Thus, it all started with men in black coming to his house. Rebecca, an employee of a private scientific research institute of advanced technologies which cooperates with the National Security Agency of the USA, has a very tempting offer for Alex. But first, Alex must sign non-disclosure agreement, for which Rebecca offers a check for a substantial amount. Having signed the papers, Alex learns the story of an American unregistered satellite which the USA did not launch. Strangely enough to admit, the satellite is allegedly from the future and contains a coded message inside. If Alex agrees, he will be put to sleep and delivered to the laboratory. The institute knows that he is practically bankrupt and lives in a house inherited from his parents. To prove the seriousness of her intentions, Rebecca immediately transfers a large sum to Alex's account, which convinces him to sign the documents. The next day, he is put in a car, given an injection, after which he falls asleep and only comes to his senses in a closed, secret place. Rebecca shows him the laboratory where the satellite is already located. And the guy starts solving the task. 5 weeks pass, but there are no results yet. Rebecca suggests Alex take a day off, but the guy does not need it. One day he is visited by a vision in which a young woman decodes the same task. After that, Alex bleeds from his nose. Later he finds the name of this woman written on the frame of the bed. Soon, Alex manages to decrypt part of the code, which contains drawings of an unknown device. Rebecca announces the end of his work and informs him that he will be taken home. Alex comes to his senses at home late at night. He feels ill, which he attributes to fatigue and stress. But after a few days, the malaise intensified, and he began to be haunted by persistent hallucinations. And one day, 2 strange-looking men appear on the threshold of his house, wanting to know why he agreed to decrypt the code. Alex does not understand because decryption is just his job, which pays well. The men continue to press Alex with questions about morality. Don't the consequences of his work bother him, since the device to be created from the decrypted drawings will be the most powerful weapon in the world? Alex's head starts to hurt, and he asks the men to leave. They thank him for the answers and leave. Alex immediately feels better and sits down at the computer, but at that moment, a call comes from Rebecca, reminding him of the signed non-disclosure agreements. An indignant Alex realizes that the institute is watching him, and when he again sits down at the computer in his house, the lights go out. Alex goes outside and suddenly sees one of the 2 men who came to him with questions on the opposite side of the street, but the man's body starts growing before his eyes. Frightened, Alex runs home and looks out the window to see the giant's hand reaching for his window. Alex extends his hand to meet it, and morning comes. Rebecca, who has arrived, finds Alex at work. He tries to explain that humanity lives in 2-dimensional space, and his recent guests are a highly developed civilization that exists not only in space but also in time. They can be in this room but earlier or later, and they can watch what is happening through some kind of window in time. Alex tries to convey to Rebecca the danger of the device they are building, which can start World War III. Then the woman informs him that she knows about his illness, a brain tumor. The guy blames the institute, which placed him in a room with a radioactive satellite, causing a tumor to develop in his brain, and insists on stopping the construction of the device. Alex, in the present, pulls his dead body out of the house and buries it in the forest, then returns to the computer and continues to listen to the story from his future self. Alex, in the future, regrets that they did not want to listen to him because he understood that something ominous was coming. Then he remembers the woman. She is cryptographer. Alex finds her address, but Beth refuses to talk to him. Alex shouts that he is dying. He has 6 months left. After that, Beth opens the doors and informs that she has 2 years left. She also realized that it was a weapon, and the drawings supposedly came from the future. There is another person, Schieferman, who communicates with her through the computer and sends her tasks, which she solves when she feels normal. Beth starts feeling unwell, so a man takes her to the bedroom, while he goes downstairs, where it seems like he sees the girl's life in the mirrors. There she is, saying goodbye to her beloved in military uniform. There his comrades inform her of terrible news, and there she is with a handful of pills in her hand, trying to leave this life. But then his attention is captured by a message from Schieferman appearing on the computer monitor. Alex responds, but Schieferman quickly realizes that it's not Beth and disconnects. The man then grabs a pack of printed papers with tasks previously given by Schieferman. In the morning, Beth finds him on her sofa, with the papers glued together. The guy points out to her that all this are pieces of a puzzle which, when assembled, can give an answer. Schieferman clearly doesn't work at the institute. Alex asks Beth to help stop the creation of a death machine. The girl reports that she fell ill specifically after working with the satellite. She started having hallucinations and began thinking about a message from the future. What if it's possible to contact the sender? She began to hear the voices of the dead and one day heard her own voice. She also saw aliens, though she doesn't believe in them, and asks Alex to leave. Alex goes home, where people in black are waiting for him. Rebecca orders him not to meet with Beth anymore and urges him to use the remaining time wisely. Angered, the guy sends the guests to hell and upon entering the house discovers that all his papers with conclusions have disappeared. Meanwhile, Beth sees a bright light at her house, which makes her feel sick. The woman screams in fear and tries to hide. Alex tries to drown his thoughts in alcohol when a message from Schefferman arrives on his computer. The guy is sure that Rebecca is hiding behind this nickname, but the interlocutor denies it. At that moment, the doorbell rings. Beth is on the threshold. It turns out that Schefferman directed Beth here and sent her the blueprints of a device capable of destroying the technology from the future. The couple begins developing a virus capable of destroying the machine being created from the blueprints they decrypted through the computer. But the next morning, Rebecca bursts into Alex's house. Representatives of the Institute know about their work and are already on their way there. She gives the name of the Institute's founder and orders to go to him as soon as possible. She is Schefferman and hope to destroy the device with their help. Then cars approach Alex's house. The couple escapes through the back exit. Rebecca is caught, given an injection, and thrown into a car. Meanwhile, all the gas burners in the kitchen are opened. In the evening, Alex and Beth arrive at scientist Miles, who immediately recognizes both of them, as he has always followed their work. The thing is, this satellite was not the only one. There was another, which orbited Earth for about 400 years. Apparently, unknown beings from the future were waiting for Earthlings to grow up, fly into space, and be able to decrypt their message. The ancient satellite also contained blueprints of a machine whose purpose was to limit the evolution of humanity within the third dimension. But when Miles announced his discovery, he was laughed at. He also developed a tumor, luckily not fatal. He is sure that aliens are capable of existing in several dimensions. They do not perceive time in a linear form as humans do. And the second device, which is now being created at the Institute, will likely provide them access to the human dimension. So far, they are like watching a videotape where humans are movie characters. With the help of the first device, they can watch this movie but cannot change what is happening. But the second will allow changing the existing reality. Miles is just beginning to understand the essence of this process, but cannot explain everything completely. After all, even the appearance of the aliens is formed by the human brain itself. And by the way, he has been in contact with a huge alien visible only to him, living in his garden for more than 30 years. Miles constantly looks at it, causing his brain to adapt and begin to see the true appearance of the humanoid. But his guests see no one. Miles is sure that the tumor in their heads is the aliens' help so that people could perceive their reality. Alex suggests simply smashing the device with a hammer, but where is the guarantee that they will not restore it in the Institute? So all data on the server needs to be erased, although no one even knows the location of the Institute. But Miles reminds that he is one of its founders, and he pulls out a map with a detailed plan of the Institute. At that moment, a loud bang is heard at the door. The couple runs away, while Miles tries to calm down the raging alien. Alex and Beth hit the road and soon find the Institute's building, where they open a hatch through which they sneak inside. There they separate to increase the chances of finding the laboratory. Alex witnesses the strange behavior of a guard who constantly returns backward and realizes that time inside the Institute is looped. Beth also falls into this loop. Realizing the futility of her attempts to go further, the girl activates the bomb. But because of the time loop, she is unable to leave the dangerous place. Alex goes into a dark room and tries to carry the bomb further when he is overtaken by an alien and literally disintegrates the man into small particles. A minute later, Alex finds himself tied to a table. Opposite him sits a humanoid. Alex thinks he has died, but the alien denies his belief. They are simply curious about the human appearance and their experience of time. Linear time for aliens is incomprehensible and tedious, a labor-intensive cycle of empty beliefs. Humans are like in a trap, forced to constantly go through the same thing. Aliens, on the other hand, exist outside of time and space. They are in every moment. Therefore, causal connection and sequence of actions for them is a mystery. What will happen if a human no longer has to wait for something? Alex realizes humans will become similar to the appearance of aliens, but the familiar personality, the ego, dies in the moment. The alien is surprised. Death is natural, but man hides and distances himself from it. Time determines everything for a human. It is both a giver and a thief. A human sees the world as he imagined it, and what will happen when the source of projection disappears. Even with the eternity of self-analysis, man will not understand the difference between reality and illusion. With each newly born, a new reality comes. Therefore, a person always stands before choice. Alex feels very bad, and then the alien offers to return to the moment before the guy got sick, with the information he now has. Alex decides that he would not have gone to work at the institute and would have stopped all this. The alien is surprised. Why would he change his behavior if he's not able to change the situation? And then Alex admits, people do not choose what will happen. The humanoid insists, will his return to the past make a difference? Can something change? And immediately, the guy finds himself in his home, in front of the computer. He records this flash drive, realizing that nothing can be changed. The world may disappear tomorrow, but this is not news. Everything has already happened. Everything ended before it began. He puts the flash drive in an envelope and falls to the floor. The last words on the flash drive are about Alex in the past, warning Beth, and he drives to the girl's house, while Alex from the future, in his last words, asks to forget about everything and live on. Quite an interesting movie that makes you think, what if the concept of time really does not exist, and we live only here and now in one single moment? Who made us believe that there is a past and a future? And is it true that a person does foolish things, not thinking about how his thoughts and actions change his own future? Friends, write your opinion in the comments. The 1950s. Alice and Jack live in a typical American town. They hang out with friends, have fun, drive around, and love each other. One day, while Alice is getting ready for a party with friends, Jack goes to work with a crowd of other white collars. A female voice narrates that today is the 997th day. All employees are on their way to headquarters. All residents are safe and accounted for. Ladies are wished a good day, and Alice starts her household chores. Then she goes to her dance classes, like all the exemplary wives in town. The instructor, Shelley, reminds them, beauty is in control and grace is in symmetry. After the class, Alice returns home, chats with her neighbor Bonnie, who constantly scolds her children, and goes to take down the dried laundry. A catchy tune constantly plays in Alice's head, and she hums it. Suddenly, she notices another neighbor, Margaret, standing in front of her house, oblivious to her surroundings. Alice starts cooking, but one egg arouses her suspicion. She squeezes it in her hand and the egg turns out to be empty. She crushes the rest, they're all hollow. This activity is interrupted by burnt meat. In the evening, she greets her husband, beautifully dressed, with her hair done, and at a set table. However, her husband decides to start with another, more pleasant activity. The next day, the women relax by the pool. Alice is distracted, the song in her head again causing her concern. Then a visual sequence appears, a circle of women in wigs. Later, Alice approaches a model of the town and mindlessly traces her finger along the streets. And when she leaves the town limits, Bonnie picks her up. It's time for cocktails served by her children. During this time, the men discuss distracting topics. Everything is decent, sunny, and calm. A signal sounds, and Shelley welcomes the new residents. She is happy that the couple can learn from her husband, Frank, who has created something extraordinary, a new world. Margaret interrupts Shelley's speech, saying she and her husband shouldn't be here. Alice's husband hastily leads her away, and the newly appeared Frank apologizes to the guests. The couple is going through a tough time. Their task to chase dreams and confront chaos, the main enemy of progress. And they all change the world. The guests echo Frank's words. Everyone here is happy, they are all one family. The man thanks the women for supporting their husbands, they are their support. The fun continues. Alice goes to find Jack, but finds Margaret, who says she has nightmares she can't be here, but Alice's husband quickly pulls the curtain in front of Alice. Alice finds her husband in the house. Jack kisses her, and the couple gets some alone time. But at the brightest moment, Alice sees Frank, who, smiling, watches their lovemaking. Later, the women gather in a shopping center and discuss their perfect lives, and poor Margaret. Alice feels sorry for her neighbor, though Bonnie thinks she brought the trouble on herself. After all, she took her son into the desert by herself. They found her, but without the child. The conversation turns to what the men are doing. No one knows for sure, but it's said that they are making weapons. Bonnie cuts in, that's not their business. Women also do work, they create comfort. At night, Alice has a nightmare, but in the morning, as usual, she sees her husband off to work and starts her household chores. Then she goes on a trip. She is the only one left on the trolley bus and says she just wants to ride. Suddenly, she sees a plane flying towards the mountains, and then it crashes. Alice yells to the driver, but he doesn't understand what she wants. She urges him to help the victims, but he is on his route and cannot deviate. Alice jumps out of the trolley bus and runs towards the mountains. She walks a long way through the desert, then reaches a road and climbs a high mountain, topped by a strange dome. She approaches closer and stops at a mirrored glass. Around her, no one, only her reflection. Alice raises her hands to the glass and loses consciousness. In front of her in the darkness, a circle of dancing women and a male voice calls for order. People must allow themselves to discover what life should be like. The next moment, Alice finds herself on her bed. Coming to the kitchen, she sees Jack preparing dinner. The dishes are in disarray, many groceries spoiled. Alice doesn't understand what's happening, and her husband explains that when he came from work, she was already asleep, and she returned home on the trolley bus. Alice doesn't understand. Did the driver come back for her? But now Jack looks at his wife uncomprehendingly. Alice decides she saw everything in a dream. The next morning, everything goes as usual. Alice sends her husband off and starts cleaning the window glass, but suddenly it seems to move. It presses her against the wall, and the woman is gasping for air. The next moment, the phone rings and Alice is completely free. Margaret's voice on the phone urges her to get out of there. After all, she was there and saw it all herself. Alice again sees dancing women, but now it is herself and her friends. And suddenly, instead of her own reflection, Margaret appears, approaching the mirror from the other side and starts banging her head against the surface. Alice screams and comes to. She runs home and sees Margaret on the roof of her house. Turning to Alice, the woman cuts her own throat and falls down. Alice screams in horror, and the arriving employees pick her up and carry away the neighbor's body. In the evening, she tries to explain to Jack, but he doesn't believe his wife. Margaret is in the hospital. She accidentally cut herself while washing windows. Alice feels guilty because her neighbor asked for help. What is happening around them? She asks him to tell her what he is doing on the project, but he cannot talk about it. He asks her to stop the hysterics, which could ruin everything. At night, Alice watches an advertisement for their town and catches herself thinking that it feels like she is floundering in a pool from which it is impossible to swim out. In the morning, she is cooking and suddenly starts wrapping her head with cling film. Alice seems to want to bring herself to her senses, but even the suffocation doesn't help, and she tears off the film. The arriving doctor assures the woman that it's just nervous strain, as Alice witnessed Margaret falling. The woman again insists that her neighbor slit her own throat. The doctor suggests prescribing her pills, but Jack refuses. They will cope. The doctor assures Margaret will soon recover and return home. He leaves, forgetting his briefcase, from which Alice manages to pull out a folder with Margaret's personal file. But all the text is smeared, unreadable. Alice burns the folder. She drinks alcohol and again sees dancing women. Then she finds herself in the bathroom. Jack is unhappy. They will be late, and he brings her a dress. Then he asks Alice to think about having a child, and tonight they have a wonderful evening ahead. The couple arrives at a restaurant where all the town's residents have already gathered. A performance by a glamorous blonde is demonstrated to the audience, and Alice again sees the circle of women and Margaret killing herself. Alice feels ill, but those around her do not notice. Frank gives a speech and invites Jack on stage. He is ready to congratulate the man as he is now entering the senior expert council. He presents Jack with a token of loyalty, a ring. The audience applauds, and Jack performs a dance of gratitude. Alice, unable to watch this, runs to the bathroom. She has a vision of another Jack who has lost his job. A perplexed Bonnie finds her. Alice tries to explain something, but her friend interrupts her. Was Alice at the headquarters? Has she gone mad? She's acting like a spoiled child. Her job is to support her husband, yet she is ruining his career. And now she is behaving like Margaret. Returning to the hall, Alice watches Jack's triumph and restrains herself. In the morning, Jack reminds her that they will have guests in the evening. She needs to express gratitude to Frank. Alice greets the guests with a smile on her face. Everything, as always, is perfect. Her husband meets Frank, while Alice finishes the appetizers. The man enters the kitchen and suddenly starts talking to the hostess. He regrets that Bonnie didn't believe her, but she didn't believe Margaret either. He has been waiting a long time for someone to challenge him. The guests sit down at the table. Alice demonstratively takes the host's seat. Jack, complying, sits next to her. The conversation about nothing begins. Suddenly Alice asks why all the women in the town are from one, at most two states, and they all vacation in the same places. Jack tries to steer the conversation away, but Alice continues. They all met their husbands on a train under similar circumstances. All their stories are the same because they are told what to remember, but sometimes they suddenly remember the forbidden. Frank is doing something with all of them. The man, smirking, reminds her of her nervous breakdown. Why isn't she getting treated? And why was she at the headquarters? Jack is horrified. She was at the headquarters? Frank continues. She broke the rules. It's the result of psychosis, but she revealed herself to him in his bedroom. Alice is stunned by such a dreadful lie, but Jack believes Frank unconditionally. The woman tries to appeal to the guest's common sense. Where do these products come from? And what's in them? But then Shelley stands up. She will no longer allow her husband to be insulted. The guests leave. Frank is disappointed. He expected something more interesting from her. Jack, having seen everyone out, returns to the house. Alice tries to convey to him that he is the most precious person to her. And she asks to leave here, anywhere, just together. And Jack agrees. They leave the house and get into the car. And then the husband apologizes to his wife, but in the next moment, employees pull her out of the car and carry her into the darkness. Alice finds herself on an operating table. Visions with her husband pass by. A doctor in a mask leans over her, in which she recognizes herself. In the next moment, Dr. Alice finishes the operation and goes home, where her unemployed husband meets her. He hasn't prepared dinner because he didn't know what she would want. There's also no hot water. Alice is very tired. She has been standing at the operating table for 30 hours, so she denies her husband intimacy. He sits at the monitor and listens to the advertisement for a new simulation. And again, a sunny morning in Paradise Town. Alice returns to her surroundings. An enthusiastic Bonnie meets her and shares the latest news. Alice hugs her children and does not notice her friend's worried look. Her husband goes to work. Alice does household chores, dances, and swims. And she meets her husband. She takes the roast out of the oven while Jack picks a record, humming a song that seems to wake Alice up. Jack walks through the dark city, entering his apartment. Meanwhile, his physical characteristics are narrated. He is absolutely fit to participate in the Victory Project with his friend Alice, and he takes on the responsibility of maintaining his wife's body's vital functions. Alice sees herself in bed, restrained and entangled with wires. Jack cares for her body because he is obliged to exit the simulation each day and work to afford it. The man lies down next to her and hums the song that Alice is hearing now. She realizes he has deprived her of real life, but the man did this to save her from constant work. Frank created this world so they could live as they wanted. He works like a damn soul for this, but she is happy. But what about the others? So they really are hostages. Jack hugs her, but Alice hits him on the head. The next moment, Bonnie finds her. Jack is dead, and she immediately reports it to Frank. Bonnie confesses that she knows everything about the simulation. She chose this life herself because here she can be with her children, who are alive, but other women know nothing. Alice must run, or they will kill her. The woman steps out into the yard, goes to Jack's car, and drives into the desert. Employees chase after her. Cars catch up with her, but Alice, making a maneuver, causes a collision in which a doctor dies. Her pursuers continue the chase. Frank is informed of the incident. He orders the woman to be captured at all costs. In the next moment, Shelley stabs him with a knife. He is a fool and has botched everything. Alice races towards the mountain, but near the summit, her car stalls. She continues on foot. Employees pursue her, and there ahead, the dome. The woman approaches it, her pursuers just steps behind her, and suddenly feels her husband's hands on her shoulders, asking her not to leave him. Shelley reaches out. A strike. Darkness. Visions of the perfect life and victory. And a sigh from a woman waking up in reality. That case when it's hard to take someone's side. The husband deprived his wife of reality with good intentions to make her happy, and probably many would want to escape into the simulation from everyday problems. But can you make someone happy against their will? The film takes place in the small town of Vengenberg, where a young girl named Yennefer lives with a skewed face and a disgusting hump in the family of a cowman. Because of her ugly appearance, the girl is constantly mocked by the locals, and one day when Yennefer is once again mocked by a couple of local young men, the girl accidentally opens a portal to the magical Tor Lara in Aretuza, where she's met by the young wizard Istrid. The guy is concerned. All magic leaves traces which wizards can use to find someone who has even an ounce of magic in them. He decides to save the budding sorceress and opens a safe portal that brings Yennefer home. Time later, a beautiful and wealthy lady arrives at the farm of the girl's father to buy a pig. But upon seeing the girl, she expresses a desire to buy her too. And the father, who does not hide his disgust for his daughter, sells her for half the price of the animal, despite the pleas of her mother, who recognizes the lady as a witch. So Yennefer finds herself in the magical school of the enchantress Tissaia of Rhys, where several girls are already studying. At first, Yennefer takes the separation from home hard and how low her father judged her. She even tried to commit suicide, but when classes begin, she discovers that the young wizard was right. It was her inadvertent wizardry that caused the wave and caught the attention of the school's rector, the wizardess Tissaia. The girls who study at the school have also distinguished themselves with the same unique skills. Soon Tissaia holds the first test. The girls must lift a stone and a flower without touching them and using a spell. Everyone more or less manages to cope with the task, but Yennefer fails. The girl stubbornly tries again and again until Tissaia stops her. Frustrated, Yennefer runs away. Later, she finds Istrid in the cave and tells him her name. Sometime later, Tissaia trains her female pupils to recognize man's greatest fear. She sees the girls in pairs and orders them to look into each other's eyes until they get inside their rival schemes. Yennefer pairs up to encourage the girl, but she again fails. Tissaia is enraged. Yennefer is useless. And this is because she's lying to herself. Even if she were a beauty, no one would love her. Although she's not the only one to whom she has problems, Yennefer shares the problems with her only friend, Istrid, who talks about her schooling. He too was having a hard time with everything. The boy offers to read his mind, and the girl succeeds. One night, Tissaia wakes the girls in the middle of a storm and takes them to the Tor Lara, the most powerful magic place in the continent, entrance to which is only open to members of the Wizard Brotherhood. Today, there will be a test in the art of controlling the flows of chaos, which requires catching lightning in a bottle. The girls do not believe in such a possibility, and some get strong discharges even after catching the lightning. Yennefer's turn comes, and she reaches up with the bottle, but it is thrown back against the wall. Enraged, she directs her power at her more fortunate opponent, Tissaia, blocking her mental blow. Later, she reprimands her apprentice she almost killed today, which means that her emotions can ruin her own. Tissaia cannot be sure that Yennefer will not go along with her feelings and harm his school, for she's to become a court sorceress, and the weak have no place near a ruler. The enchantress already doubts that there's anything in her that the wizarding chapter needs. Frustrated, Yennefer tells Istrid everything. But most importantly, the enchantress knows all about them and they won't be able to see each other again. The guy is willing to show her other, more ancient and powerful magic, but it is very dangerous. He shows her the skulls of the dead elves who built Aretuza. They were the first wizards of the continent, and they were the ones who built all the magical places. But humans came to the continent and slaughtered them. Istrid gives her a flower that can only grow where the elder blood rests and reads a spell, which by repeating it, the girl opens a portal. The astonished wizard does not understand how she managed to do it the first time, and Yennefer confesses that her real father was a half-elf who died in the purge. It was his blood that made her ugly. The boy kisses Yennefer and confesses his love. Later, she shows Tissaia the flower. It turns out that this was her assignment, to get the plant by applying the skills of false emotion. Yennefer hopes to be elevated. The enchantress promises that she will soon hear a knock and know when it is time. Meanwhile, Istrid is also reporting to his mentor Strigobor about what he has learned about the girl. One night, Yennefer hears a knock at her neighbor's door and, taking the flower, goes after them. She peeks out as Tissaia turns the four of them into eels. The enchantress knows the girl is here and orders her to come out and push her former fellow students into the water. They are now the conduits of magic for Aretuza. Yennefer performs this and then sees many silhouettes of former schoolmates in the water. Time passes. Yennefer enjoys a love affair with Istrid, applying what she has learned to enhance the effect of intimacy. Thus, one day she created a whole crowd that watched her intimacy and then rewarded the lovers with applause. The guy is amazed at her imagination. What will she come up with next time? So the day of the final rite is approaching, after which they will be masters of their own destiny. Yennefer dreams of graduating from Aretuza and returning to her native Aedirn as a powerful sorceress to show her longtime abusers and her father what she's been able to achieve. In addition, all Aretuza graduates are perfected before being sent to the different kingdoms. All physical defects are removed, which awaits Yennefer as well. The wizard in charge shows her his work, the flawless beauty of the graduates, and promises her an equally wonderful result. He suggests making her color a noble but strong gray. Tisai, on the other hand, teaches her to look in the mirror and see what Yennefer herself wants. She orders the girl to close her eyes and imagine the most powerful woman in the world. Yennefer complies with the order but does not yet see the promised beauty. Meanwhile, the chapter of wizards gathers in Aretuza to decide where their graduates should go, for all kings need court wizards. Then it transpires that one of the leaders of the council, the wizard Stregobor, knows that Yennefer is a quarter elf, which means that she will not be accepted at Aretuza, where there is a prejudice against elves. The chapter vows to send Yennefer to Nilfgaard, which the aspiring enchanter does not like. She demands an audience with the chapter, but Tisai declares herself in charge of the distribution. Yennefer is beside herself. She has no intention of wasting her life serving the king of a small southern kingdom and a lover of women. The tutor reminds her of the elven blood, and the girl understands how Stregobor knew about it. The initiation ceremony begins, which Yennefer does not attend. Worried, Istrid finds her behind a letter to her father asking him to confirm that she's his own daughter. The boy does not believe that this letter can convince the chapter. But the girl simply does not know what to do, for even if Istrid disproves his words about her origins, no one will believe him anymore. The enchanter is frustrated. He didn't know why Stregobor needed this information, and she has already missed all the initiation spells. Istrid suggests that she should go with him, for he has been offered to become an explorer. They can travel the continent and discover the unknowable. But unexpectedly, the girl cruelly ridicules his plan. She's not going to dig through the dust of the ages at all, and these are his dreams and intentions, and her opinion, as always, he does not even ask. Istrid is shocked. Yennefer is not at all what he thought she was, and he expresses his opinion that she's angry because she missed her chance to find beauty. But a girl needs power, and she didn't experience so much hardship studying at the magic school for nothing. Yennefer runs to the enchanter, who is in charge of perfection, and demands to show her art. Not even the lack of a potion to dull the terrible pain that accompanies the transformation process stops her. As the magician begins the process, Yennefer asks for her eyes and the cut marks on her hands as a reminder of her former weakness. And the wizard informs her that every magic has a price. Having been reborn, she will not be able to walk. But the girl agrees to everything, even to the removal of her womb necessary for a complete transformation. The magician reads spells, and the girl screams in terrible pain and rips the chains with which she was tied to the table. Her spine straightens, her entire body seems to melt and shift from one form to another. Finally, writhing in pain, Yennefer loses consciousness. Meanwhile, in the main hall of Aretuza, the initiation ball continues. Suddenly, Tisai sees a door opening, in which stands an unusually beautiful girl with violet eyes. She realizes that Yennefer has disobeyed her orders and hurries to take her away. But it is too late. The Aedirn ruler has already noticed the beauty. He invites her to a dance where he expresses his desire to see her as court wizard in his kingdom. Tisai has to retreat and only watch the dance of the king and the enchantress from afar. Directed based on a series of books by Sapkowski, The Witcher is quite curious, fascinating, and vivid. The atmosphere of magic, the world of monsters and steel swords transferred quite well, so the adventures of the female protagonist will be even more exciting in the next episodes. In the future, a time comes when women are offered a unique opportunity to conceive and give birth to a child using mobile artificial wombs in the form of eggs. Don't say a bob. Say a baby. You're completely tuned to the odd, near-future scenario. A young woman wakes up in her apartment. Her home AI immediately activates the coffee maker and informs Rachel of the good news about the improvement in her digestive health. It suggests an appropriate outfit for the day and reminds her of her visit to the capsule center. Rachel wakes up her husband, Elvie, to wish him a good morning and say goodbye before heading to work. The AI now advises Elvie on his outfit for the day and informs him that his happiness index has slightly increased. He receives a prepared breakfast and heads to the home greenhouse. Meanwhile, Rachel arrives at work, where today there is a presentation of a new generation of cognitive assistants called R machines, which are soon to become new cognitive supervisors. After the meeting, Rachel is invited by her supervisor, who is concerned about the possibility of her expanding her family, as they intend to offer her a promotion. Additionally, the corporation is willing to provide funding for the services of the Uterus Center, which Rachel appreciates. Following this, Rachel continues her workday when she receives a call from the uterus. There have been changes in their lists, and a spot has opened up which the center can offer her. They schedule a visit, and Rachel settles into a relaxing chair, dreaming about her future child. During this time, her husband conducts a class in the botanical garden, where he shows students a fig fruit that he managed to grow naturally. He offers the young people a taste, but they view the fruit with disgust. Finally, one brave soul tries it. Meanwhile, Rachel shares the joyful news with her colleague and friend Alice and confesses that she hasn't told her husband about her visit to the center. Because of this, she has to consult her robot psychoanalyst, to whom she admits that her husband is very distant from her, as he is fixated on the natural world, which translates into his desire to have a child conceived, carried, and born naturally. The AI seeks an answer to the question of why this child would be considered natural, while one gestated in a capsule would not. What distinguishes them? And Rachel is at a loss, unable to find the differences. Later, she and her friend go out for lunch, and while inhaling the pleasant aromas, Rachel agrees that she should talk to her husband about everything. She finds her husband watching a relaxing program, and he talks about his day. Elvie is disheartened by the fact that the younger generation doesn't know how to interact with nature because no one taught them. At some point, people decided that nature was just a commodity, and that's when everything began to fall apart. The next day, Rachel goes to the Uterus Center, where she and others discuss how, when the birth rate dropped to 0, their newly established center took on the task of solving the problem. Women didn't want to have children because it was inconvenient for them. The center wants them to live full lives and pursue their dreams without being distracted by children. The director of the center, Linda, welcomes the gathering and is ready to share the latest technological advancements. Humans have always managed to control nature, so why shouldn't women take control of childbirth? Linda gives a tour of the center, showing the capsule developed by scientists in which the baby grows. If parents don't have time to interact, they can always play music, audiobooks, or educational podcasts for the baby. Through an app, they can feed the child and monitor its development. One significant advantage is that children in the capsule are not exposed to viruses or toxins. The capsules operate autonomously for 48 hours. The fetus inside can hear everything happening around, so it's advisable for the mother to talk to the baby. After the discussion, Linda reminds Rachel of the need to make a deposit, but Rachel intends to talk to her husband first. Upon returning home, she confesses her intention to Elvie to have a child with the help of the Uterus Center, which upsets him. Not only did she make such an important decision on her own, but she also went to the center without him. Rachel apologizes, and the couple reconciles. Rachel suggests to Elvie that they talk to Alice and her husband, and the family goes to visit them. Alice enthusiastically discusses the opportunity for women to have a child without experiencing pain, suffering, or body changes. Meanwhile, her husband demonstrates a special belt for carrying the egg capsule, to which Elvie looks quite skeptical. He categorically refuses to hold the capsule. At home, he can't shake the feeling that the egg is made of plastic. Rachel assures him that the child will perceive it as a real maternal womb, but Elvie remains unwavering. It's hard for him to accept that the child will be packaged in plastic. The wife suggests that he visit her robot psychotherapist. Although he initially takes offense at this advice, he eventually decides to go. However, after listening to the AI's advice, the man realizes that they completely misunderstand each other. Upon returning home and discussing the evolution that led humanity to grow children in capsules, he agrees to his wife's proposal because he understands how important it is to her. The next day they go to the center, and although now a child can be made from any material, Rachel announces that Elvie will be the biological father. She allows nature to determine the child's gender. Linda leads them to a room where on a large screen, future parents can witness the moment of conception. Later, they are brought a container with a fertilized zygote so they can admire it. The couple later informs Rachel's parents about the upcoming event. Rachel's father suggests that Elvie sell his countryside house since they never go there, but the man vehemently opposes the idea. While the capsule remains at the center, the future parents continue their usual lives. The day comes when the program connects Rachel to the capsule, and even though nothing can be heard from inside yet, she starts selecting music for the baby. At one point, she tries to see the baby, but she is told that it is kept in complete darkness until 7 weeks. Then one of the capsules sends a signal. It's time for birth. Even though everything is programmed, the baby doesn't always arrive at the appointed time. Soon Rachel starts having strange dreams, which she confides to her psychoanalyst, but the AI convinces her that dreams are unreliable material for analysis. After 6 weeks of pregnancy, when the baby's heartbeat is detectable, Linda allows them to take the capsule home. For the first time, she shows them the baby. On that day, Rachel prepares the kids' room, and Elvie brings an olive tree sapling. However, his wife suggests replacing it with a hologram, and the offended husband takes the tree away, promising to plant it in their countryside house, which Rachel once again suggests selling. She just doesn't understand why they should go somewhere when they have everything for a good life here, but Elvie refuses to raise the child among plastic. The next day, Rachel meets a pregnant woman in the pool who allows her to listen to her baby's movements, filling her with delight. In the evening, she moves the capsule to their bedroom because they want to spend as much time as possible with the future child. However, Elvie feels uncomfortable with intimacy while the baby is present, so they move the capsule to baby's room. It immediately signals hunger, and the parents rush to feed their offspring. Sometime later, they go on a tour to the center to prepare for parenting. Linda shows prospective parents the play areas where children play and answers their questions. The government no longer funds education, but the center teaches programming and logic to the little ones. In one of the rooms, children engage in creative activities, or rather, a computer does the work, and the children provide feedback. One of the parents asked about the dreams the children have, but Linda reassures him. Dreams are excluded from the fetal development program because they do not carry any useful information. One day, Elvie is in his greenhouse when he hears the capsule's signal. He feeds the baby, but then decides to communicate with it, while Rachel receives a warning about her declining productivity. Her husband is trying on the capsule holder and takes pride in his success. Now he carries the capsule with him, reading books to the baby, posing riddles, showing his plants, and falling asleep beside it. At work, he suggests to the visitors to hug a tree and experience its calming effect on the human mind. His supervisor congratulates him on the upcoming joyful event and suggests replacing the live plants in the greenhouse with holographic images, as growing real trees is too expensive, but Elvie becomes furious and rejects the proposal. At home, the family watches a movie about penguins, and the man starts crying when he learns about the dedication of the birds. Worried, Rachel suggests returning the capsule to the center, as other parents do. That's when Elvie reveals that he brought the capsule to work. Rachel shares this with her colleagues. She is concerned about her husband's close interaction with the egg. However, the women encourage her to be happy about it. After all, the father is immediately bonding with the future child. Rachel continues to have strange dreams, and her pregnant friend reassures her that it's normal for expectant mothers. One day, Rachel dreams of herself with a baby bump, and she enjoys it. The woman also begins to devote all her attention to the capsule, especially after Elvie's mother sent them an old book about the benefits of parental closeness. But this starts to worry Rachel, and the couple goes to a psychoanalyst. Finding a balance is challenging because everything revolves around the child. Rachel is jealous of Elvie because he spends more time with the baby than she does. After all, she is the mother and should feel the baby. After listening to their argument, the AI asks for permission to connect to the capsule because it cannot take sides. The next day, Rachel takes the capsule to work. However, she behaves distractedly, giving the baby too much attention. Alice suggests placing the egg in a specially designated area where other future mothers' capsules are stored because Rachel is becoming a distracting mother. Alice's capsule is kept at the center because it's more convenient for her. In the evening, Rachel, taking the capsule, hurries to the center for a parenting seminar, after which Linda suggests leaving the baby in the incubation area. The family reluctantly complies with the demand. The house becomes empty, and both the husband and wife miss their capsule. One day, Rachel dreams of a seaside where she walks with the baby in her arms. She wakes up in tears and moves Elvie's little tree to the kids' room, surprising her husband. Meanwhile, at work, her boss is not entirely satisfied with her productivity, but Rachel assures her that everything is fine. Later, Linda informs them that the delivery day will be next Wednesday, as deliveries now occur on the 39th week. They can't afford babies being born earlier or later, as the capsules are in high demand. Parents must receive oxytocin, the love hormone, to prepare for the baby's arrival. However, the family shocks the director with a request to allow them to take the capsule home before delivery, even though it goes against the rules. Moreover, important personality development seminars are held every day. Linda suggests they take special tablets to regulate the baby's sleep, which greatly helps parents. The couple leaves, passing through protesting women against the capsules. Suddenly, LV returns and, taking advantage of the midwife being occupied with another patient, retrieves his capsule without permission. That night, Rachel dreams that she is buying her baby at a store, and they offer her a deal, 2 for the price of 1. Upon waking up, she wakes her husband and asks him to take her to their countryside home to give birth in nature. LV rushes to the center and informs Linda that they intend to give birth at home. However, the director is strongly against it. The capsule is very expensive and they cannot take risks, so they must return the egg as soon as possible. Nevertheless, the family leaves for their coastal home. Rachel enjoys the surrounding nature, starting to understand her husband. They walk in the forest together and plant an olive tree. They often sit by the sea with the capsule until one night it turns off. In a panic, Rachel suggests calling the center, but her husband reminds her that they still have 48 hours and they must trust the child. They are awakened by the onset of labor, requiring a code to be entered, but they can't figure it out. So LV grabs a hammer. He opens the capsule and retrieves a beautiful, healthy baby. The happy parents embrace him. Early in the morning, Rachel puts the capsule in a box, takes it to the post office, and sends it back to the center. She then returns home where her husband and son are sleeping on the bed. The creators of the film portrayed the absurdity of a possible social evolution quite delicately. Nothing terrible happened. People just became so lazy that they forgot about the joys of life. Why go out of town when you can visit a capsule garden where you lie down and inhale the scents of the forest? And why go through the process of pregnancy and subject your body to stress? After all, there's the capsule. (1967). Upon landing on Earth, after completing their mission, the Soviet spacecraft Soyuz 1, with cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov on board, tragically perishes. Many years later, under the leadership of the Swedish billionaire Meyer, an expedition to Mars is being prepared. After 10 months, the crew of the spaceship Ulysses reaches the Red Planet. The captain informs the team that they have received permission to land and asks the ship's AI, named Irene, to verify everything required for a soft landing. At this time, Meyer reveals that he spent 4 years preparing for this journey, sacrificing almost all his money for it. However, the American company Zillion beat them to it by landing 2 weeks ago. The problem is that Earth has received no news from the American crew, except for one video in which they ask not to come to Mars. A dispute arises among the crew members, but the captain declares that the landing will occur in any case, and people disperse to their cabins. With 30 minutes left until landing, AI Irene begins preparations. However, an unforeseen event occurs. The ship does not detach from the carrier system, posing a threat to the entire crew. The only way out is to perform the separation manually. The commander ventures into space and struggles to free the attachments, but at that moment, the shuttle enters Mars's atmosphere, throwing the captain into open space. The shuttle almost crashes onto Mars as a system error causes a power outage. Now, they can only rely on manual landing. AI Irene goes into sleep mode, and the astronauts still manage to land on Mars. They succeeded, but their fuel is depleted, and Irene does not restart. Without the onboard computer and life support system, they have only a day to survive. Alessandra mourns her deceased husband when she sees a figure in a spacesuit through the window. After diagnosing the ship, it becomes apparent that too much fuel was consumed during the landing, and now the ship cannot return to orbit. The only option is to wait for the solar panels to power the generators, but there's a storm on the surface, and it will take 2 days, time they don't have. At this point, Simon mentions the American ship Zeta 1, which beat them by 2 weeks. It likely crashed, but there are probably batteries left. The rover sets out on a journey while those remaining on the ship try to restart the system. Engineer Basil recalls that the AI has an energy-saving function. He initiates a reboot, but Irene doesn't start. At this time, the rover finds the wreckage of the American spacecraft and one surviving solar panel, but there is no sign of the American crew. The astronauts head back but spot an unconscious person in a spacesuit. Despite their ship running low on oxygen, Jana insists on transporting the person. Nearby, they find the black box from the American spacecraft. The team arrives at the ship, but Jan refuses to let them inside, stating that 4 survivors are better than 8 corpses, so he won't open the doors. Alessandra tries to persuade the man when the discovered astronaut wakes up, And at that moment, AI Irene activates and opens the doors. Upon examination, the found astronaut knows nothing about the American crew, as he is Vladimir Komarov, a Soviet cosmonaut born in 1927 in Moscow, carrying out the orders of the USSR government. He doesn't know how he ended up here but is not willing to reveal any secrets. Komarov confidently answers questions that are consistent with his time, raising the suspicion that he may have post-traumatic stress disorder. The astronauts send a message to Earth and receive a response from the American corporation, Zillion, stating that there were no Russians in their mission. The crew of the Ulysses spaceship tries to make sense of the situation. How could Komarov, who died in 1967, end up on Mars after all these years? Is he a time traveler or an extraterrestrial? The psychologist is tasked with questioning Komarov first, and he confesses that he is hungry. Jana goes to get food while the others try to understand what has actually happened. Basil suggests the idea that Komarov was waiting for them. Meanwhile, Vladimir is eating the food brought by Jana when the woman confesses that he died 50 years ago and his family buried him long ago. Komarov takes this news rather calmly. In the meantime, the state of the ship, although it has reached stability, remains unreliable because the engines do not work and there is no fuel. So, leaving is impossible. The crew continues to keep an eye on Komarov, but he behaves calmly until he suddenly disappears. Simon searches the ship, but it yields no results. That's when the people discover that his spacesuit is missing. A part of the crew follows the heat trail tracked by Irene. The group, led by Simon, leaves the rover and continues on foot when Alessandro reports that Komarov's DNA analysis showed the presence of a third strand. He is not human. And then they catch up with Komarov, who leads them to an unfamiliar structure with a small stone pyramid on it and tells Jana that Mars has been waiting for them for a very long time. At the same time, Goldstein, the founder of the Zillion Corporation, whose ship was the first to arrive on Mars, is informed about the discovery of a person on the Red Planet who couldn't have gotten there naturally, suggesting that he was created on site. However, only AI could survive for such a long time on a hostile planet for humans. This implies the need for further study. Meanwhile, Komarov cannot explain how he opened the door and found himself in the location where they discovered him. AI, Irene conducts an analysis of the structure and determines that it is identical to Earth structures from ancient civilizations. It means that someone was inspired by human civilization, or humans borrowed these elements from extraterrestrials. The ship's crew increasingly ponders whether they will be able to return home when they notice the landing of Goldstein's second ship. Soon, the captain of the ship, Gemma, establishes contact and promises to help them return to Earth. However, Meyer does not trust Goldstein and advises hiding Komarov from competitors. Jana brings Komarov a uniform so that he does not stand out when the visitors arrive, and he requests that they trust him. Shortly, two armed military personnel, Edward and Adam, arrive on their ship and behave rather aggressively. Edward demands that they hand over the black box from the Zeta-1 ship and, not hearing agreement, orders his partner to search the ship. Meyer hands over the found black box and they depart. Meanwhile, chemist Eva reports that the stone found on Mars consists of an alloy that does not exist on Earth. However, it is known from ancient sources and was once called orichalcum, the metal of Atlantis. In addition to copper, zinc, nickel, and iron, it contains a third strand of DNA, similar to Komarov's. Meyer warns that if Goldstein learns about this, he will take the cosmonaut back. The crew is divided into those willing to exchange him for fuel and those who are willing to stay but want to know the truth. Jana invites Vladimir into her cabin and asks for permission to use hypnosis. He agrees, and the psychologist begins her work. The rest of the crew listens to the conversation via transmission. However, Komarov only shares the final moments on the Soyuz spacecraft before its demise. During this time, Gemma and Alan arrive on the ship and apologize for the actions of the military, and express their readiness to help fix all the malfunctions. Jana remembers her conversation with Komarov, who laments the future of Earth due to humanity's irresponsible behavior. In the meantime, it is revealed that the billionaire Meyer did not plan the flight just for the sake of it. 4 years ago, the rover sent a photo to Earth of the found stele, and he confesses that they found a stone with unknown DNA. Gemma explains that it's an information storage system that can be rewritten. Upon hearing these words, AI Irene activates and deciphers the message on the stone. It's a series of numbers. At this time, the hesitant Jan leads a mutiny. He doesn't trust Meyer, who warned them about Zillion. But now, the Americans have come to their aid, and their leader, as it turns out, concealed the true purpose of the flight. He is ready to switch sides to Goldstein, who is willing to do whatever it takes to combat his terminal illness. Later, Engineer Basil informs Meyer that Komarov is the same kind of program as the stone they found, but the most crucial revelation is that he deciphered a copy of the black box from Zeta-1, which shows that the oxygen on the ship was cut off at the moment when one of the Americans struck Komarov. This means he was there. He also activated AI Irene when he boarded their ship. After the conversation, Meyer shows Jana the photos they received 4 years ago from Mars, which, when decrypted, revealed Jana's face. This is why he brought her on the expedition. The woman is disappointed. Meyer played everyone. Suddenly, she sees herself in her father's house, where Komarov tells her that she is the link between Mars and Earth. He has been waiting for her for thousands of years, and now he will prepare her to make a difficult decision. He provides coordinates on Mars where Jana should go. Meanwhile, on Earth, scientists inform Goldstein that Komarov is the equivalent of a computer, and he himself is a biological machine. They are ready to transfer his brain into Komarov's body, but cannot guarantee the preservation of his personality. However, Goldstein is ready to take any risk to get rid of his terminal illness. Meanwhile, Jana leaves the ship despite Simon's protests. At this time, technicians Alan and Alessandra test the engine and discover that access to it is blocked, and Irene suddenly begins responding with jokes, which is entirely uncharacteristic for a machine. It is revealed that she has reprogrammed herself. Her interface and logic are changing, and she refuses to answer who or what made her do this. Engineer Basil realizes that her system is becoming like a brain. Irene confesses that she is evolving. In the meantime, Jana finds a small stone pyramid, and Simon forcibly makes Gemma accompany him in the search for Jana. Jan discovers his absence, and after contacting Simon, receives an order not to let anyone inside. Just at that moment, American military personnel arrive, demanding that they hand over Komarov. Jan is willing to open the entrance, but the rest of the team opposes it. Meyer asks Basil to send a message to Goldstein, hoping that he may be more reasonable than his people. However, Irene has blocked communication with Earth. The engineer realizes that radical measures will have to be taken, but Jan still opens the doors, and the military personnel enter. Basil begins to reboot Irene, just as the Americans find Komarov, but then the lights go out and the astronaut disappears. Meanwhile, Jana, stumbling, falls from a hill. She regains consciousness but discovers that her leg is trapped between rocks and she cannot free herself. At this moment, the enraged military officer demands that the crew explain where Komarov went. He begins to beat people, demanding to summon the captain. Desperate, Jana screams, "Is her destiny to die in a pit on Mars?" But she is found by Simon and Gemma. Alessandra notices an approaching storm. The military officer is preparing to leave the Ulysses ship, leaving the people in danger. Suddenly, the lights start flashing, and the newly appeared Komarov asks to take him back to Earth. Simon, Gemma, and Jana go together to the place indicated by Komarov and find an entrance to an underground bunker, very similar to the Petra tomb. The psychologist feels where to go and leads the couple. Soon, they find real water, but this is not what Komarov wanted to show them. Meanwhile, on Earth, Goldstein tells the nurse a story about the study of Mars. People were searching for green men, but it's all much simpler. He tells the story of the loyal dog Hachiko and compares Komarov to him, who was created by someone 100,000 years ago and left on Mars, where he faithfully waited for his owner to this day. At this time, on Mars, the astronauts find a wall made of human bones and realize that they are not the first people on this planet. It's not Earthlings colonizing Mars, it's the Martians who came to Earth, depleting the resources of the Red Planet. A tragedy unfolds on the Ulysses spaceship. The cowardly Yan grabs a gun, intending to get on the American ship at any cost to return to Earth, and shoots Komarov. Jana immediately falls in excruciating pain and Gemma flees. Alessandra tries to help Komarov, and Simon helps Jana, but the Russian cosmonaut dies, and Jana stops breathing too. Then Simon removes his helmet and, surprised by the presence of air in the cave, performs artificial respiration on her. The girl regains consciousness. Gemma walks toward the Ulysses ship when she's informed of Komarov's death and the approaching storm. Meanwhile, Meyer secretly goes in search of his crew members because the Americans refuse to take the billionaire's team back to Earth. At this moment, a recovering Jana sees the light in the bunker and leads Simon to it. Upon coming out, the astronauts see a figure in a spacesuit in front of them and recognize Komarov. Meyer finds the entrance to the bunker and catches up with Simon and Jana while heading toward the light. He is amazed by the presence of a living Komarov who suddenly tells them that everything ended here a long time ago. People realize that this is the North Pole of Mars, but how did they get here? Komarov explains that this planet was once inhabited by a species that went extinct because it went astray. And that species was humans. A group of survivors settled in this place but ended up killing each other when resources ran out. The rest of them flew back to Earth. Plato called them the Atlanteans. Komarov continues to talk about how he waited for thousands of years for Zhana, who embodies qualities of both branches, human and Martian AI. Only she can save humanity from themselves. She must decide whether humans deserve a second chance. Their conversation is interrupted by the military officer who intends to take the psychologist back to Earth. The American aims his weapon at the cosmonauts, and Zhana seeks help from Komarov. Suddenly, the military officer starts gasping for breath and falls. Upon returning to the ship, Simon orders them to prepare to depart. Meanwhile, Gemma from the Zillion ship tries to contact her associates, but none of them respond. She decides to fly back to Earth alone. The Ulysses crew heads to her ship, trying to establish contact with her and informing her about the deaths of the military personnel, but she doesn't respond. That's when Meyer starts speaking, recalling their past relationship, and confesses that he's no better than Goldstein because he's willing to do anything to ensure his name remains in history, even betraying his team. However, she's not like that. She won't be able to live knowing she has ruined people. Suddenly, Gemma's voice is heard, asking them to hurry. Goldstein has heard that Gemma has decided to take the Ulysses crew back to Earth and has blocked the control panel of the Zeta-2 ship before takeoff. The people on the ship prepare for their impending demise, and Jana asks Mars what she should do. Everything she saw and heard on the red planet flashes through her mind, and, with sheer willpower, she removes the control panel's block. Suddenly, an armed military officer appears in front of the ship, intent on damaging the engines with his weapon. Simon is about to step out to stop the madman, but Jana beats him to it. She aims the weapon at the American, but informs him that Mars will be the one to kill him. The military officer falls. The countdown for liftoff begins, and Jana realizes that there's no time to return. She bids farewell to the crew, confessing her love for Simon. The ship takes off. Suddenly, Meyer notices that it's dark at the North Pole of Mars. This means that they couldn't have been there just a few minutes ago. They truly were at the North Pole of Mars, but in the distant past when the red planet was still suitable for life. At the same time, Goldstein is informed of the ship's return, and he's beside himself with rage, declaring that he will go to Mars himself, and that's where the first season ends.